This white-haired kid started boxing 2 weeks ago, but he makes seasoned fighters look like total amateurs. He slips punches like they move in slow motion and counters from angles that break the laws of physics. He overwhelms the number 3 ranked fighter in the country, driving him into the canvas with a dead smirk on his face. His timing and raw power shatter every defense. He chains attacks together unrestricted by normal human limits. This display catches the eye of Coach K, a legendary trainer who forged 5 world champions. He came looking for his final disciple and believes he found a God-given talent. But then Coach K hears a commotion outside the gym. He looks out into an alleyway and finds a gloomy kid taking a brutal beating from a gang of bullies. The boy refuses to block, letting the fists crash into his face. But the legendary coach notices something terrifying. Those eyes harbor zero fear. They are dead, and he looks bored out of his mind. Coach K asks why he took the hits since the punches were sluggish and worthless. The boy replies that he could not be bothered. K decides to trust his intuition and puts this kid to the ultimate test. He launches a devastating punch straight at the boy's head, but the kid slips it. He shows no panic. He does not flinch. He moves his head a fraction of an inch, leaving the coach striking empty air. K begs to recruit him, but the kid asks a single chilling question. Is hitting people fun? This boy has zero hunger for dominance. He is the exact opposite of the arrogant prodigy inside. K tells him that fighting proves your worth and provides the ultimate thrill. He dares the kid to see how far he can go, showing him a perfect boxer's stance and giving him a 1-month deadline to join the gym. The next day at school, a nerdy kid named Jay gets tormented, acting as a human chair for the white-haired prodigy Ryu. He forces Jay to eat garbage, making him throw up in the bathroom. When the gloomy kid blocks a speeding soccer ball, Ryu slaps him across the face, trying to instill terror. But the boy gives him that same empty stare, prompting Ryu to promise him a living hell. Later that afternoon, Jay finds the gloomy kid cornered by the gang and decides he cannot let his friend suffer alone. He drops into a boxing stance, challenging a monster he knows he cannot beat. Jay throws a desperate combination, but Ryu is a different breed. He delivers a punishing blow, driving Jay into the concrete over and over. It becomes a bloodbath. Jay takes brutal hit after brutal hit, waiting for a single opening to counter. He gets crushed, beaten past the point of consciousness, but he still roars his dream of becoming a boxer. The quiet kid watches this display of raw human will and asks Ryu a familiar question. Is it fun? He steps up to the gang and unleashes a flawless strike. Ryu watches his underling fold in half, shaking in raw fear. Coach K knows what this means. He trained champions and prodigies his entire life. The next morning at school introduces the local food chain. The white-haired prodigy loves the attention from his sycophants. They think he is bound for world championship glory. This world is divided into predators and prey. Jay is trapped at the very bottom, enduring daily humiliation while keeping his head down. During lunch, Ryu's crew tosses dirty candy into Jay's ramen and forces him to eat it. Jay is a level 1 stickman in a server full of griefers. He has zero choice but to slurp it down. The sickened boy throws up in the bathroom, hating his own weakness. Later, Jay sits on the bleachers next to Yu, the gloomy kid, the guy who moves like a ghost and possesses physical stats that terrify the gym teachers, yet he refuses to apply himself to anything. Jay points out Yu's high athletic scores and asks why he avoids sports. Yu states that everything feels hollow. He holds zero ambitions and cares about nothing. Trying to spark a conversation, Jay admits his own dream is to be a boxer like his father. The moment gets cut short when Ryu kicks a soccer ball straight at Jay's face to ruin the mood. Without standing up, Yu catches the projectile in one hand. Furious that someone dared to block his shot, Ryu storms over and slaps Yu across the face. He grabs the boy by the hair, trying to force a reaction of terror. Yu stares back with pitch-black, lifeless eyes. The threat registers as nothing to him. That evening, Jay locks himself in his room and shadow boxes. He harbors a secret, burning desire to fight back, but the memory of Ryu's overwhelming strength crushes his spirit. He knows the gap is a bottomless canyon. Seeking guidance, Jay asks his dad, a former pro boxer, what to do when facing an unbeatable opponent. His dad gives an honest answer. Sometimes, fear takes over. You freeze up and take the beating because surrendering feels safer. But a true boxer refuses to stay down. The moment you refuse to stand up, your career dies. He also adds a reality check. Outside the ring, running away takes courage. Both choices demand respect. While Jay finds comfort in this advice, Ryu stalks Yu to his home. The prodigy delivers a bone-jarring kick, aiming to break the boy's apathetic facade. Yu hits the ground, but his face betrays zero emotion, infuriating his attacker even more. Frustrated by the lack of fear, Ryu demands extortion money by tomorrow afternoon, promising a life of torment. Leaving the alley, Ryu feels a lingering rage from those empty eyes. He spots a rival gang waiting for trouble. The white-haired demon flashes a wicked grin and unleashes his fury. The gang leader gets his face rearranged with a single blow. Ryu terrorizes the rest, demanding they beg for mercy on their knees. Back in the apartment, Yu sits in the dark with a stray cat. His world remains an unbroken void, untouched by the chaos of the day. The next morning, Jay puts on his glasses with newfound resolve. He plans plans to confront Ryu, choosing to stand up rather than live another day on his knees, but the bullies ignore him all day. The empty desk next to him sends a chill down his spine. Yu is missing from class. The realization hits him like a truck. They took Yu instead. Jay tracks them down to an abandoned warehouse. The gang has Yu cornered, ready to collect their debt. Jay bursts through the doors, shouting at them to stop. Silence fills the room. Jay feels his heart hammer against his ribs. He crossed the point of no return. His legs shake, but his stance holds. Panic threatens to overwhelm him, but he forces his hands up into a guard. Ryu finds this act of defiance hilarious and sends his lackey to handle the nerd. Jay remembers his father's teachings. He shifts his weight, pivots his hip, and unloads a clean 1-2 combination. The punch lands flush, breaking the goon's nose. For a fleeting second, Jay tastes victory. Then Ryu steps forward. The mood shifts. The final boss decides to intervene, dropping the playful act. Ryu flashes that signature wicked smile and goads Jay into attacking first. Jay figures his one hope is a relentless, high-speed assault. He throws a flurry of punches with everything he has. Ryu dodges every single one with a casual smirk, never breaking a sweat. Finding an opening, Ryu delivers a punishing counter that sends Jay crashing. The power difference is overwhelming. Jay gasps for air, his vision swimming. Changing tactics, Jay raises his guard high, planning to endure the damage until Ryu burns out. Ryu accepts the challenge. He unleashes a barrage of blows that smash through Jay's arms and pummel his body. Jay experiences the agonizing reality of a street fight. His organs scream in pain. To mock him further, Ryu drops his left arm, fighting with a self-imposed handicap. The bully winds up for a massive telegraphed swing. It looks like a fatal mistake. Jay seizes the bait and throws a desperate counter-strike. Ryu slips the punch like it was choreographed. He slams Jay into the dirt with crushing force. Lying on the concrete, Jay thinks about his father. The man held a mediocre record of wins and losses, a stepping stone for greater fighters, but his father possessed a grit that trophies cannot measure. No matter how brutal the beating, he always stood back up. Driven by that memory, Jay refuses to surrender. He forces his broken body to rise. Ryu views this resilience as a personal insult. The prodigy mocks Jay, calling him a pathetic loser who thought boxing could save him. Jay spits blood and smiles. Winning was never the goal. The nerd just wanted to stop running from his fear. With his remaining breath, Jay screams his dream to the world. He will become a boxer. Yu watches the scene unfold. For the first time, something registers in his hollow gaze. He recalls the exact question he asked Coach K. He asks Ryu if hitting people is fun. The narrative shifts to Coach K. He reveals that every legendary boxer has a rhythm, a specific tell that opponents study for years. In the warehouse, Yu steps up to the gang. The lackey charges forward with a wild swing. Yu steps inside the guard and unloads an explosive straight punch. It connects with bone-shattering force, a strike of pure nightmare. The lackey crumples to the floor, knocked out cold. Ryu stares in sheer disbelief, his body trembling for the first time in his life. Coach K's voiceover continues. When he tested the boy in the alley, the dodge was not born of animal instinct or luck. The boy saw the punch. Mine analyzed the trajectory and moved out of the way with exact precision. K has evaluated countless geniuses across his career, but the one standing in the warehouse is a different entity. Ryu feels an entirely foreign sensation creeping up his spine. His heart hammers against his ribs. He glares forward, demanding to know what the kid is staring at. It is a desperate attempt to scream away the tension. The quiet kid's soul-reaping gaze does not waver. Terror is already inside the room. Coach K watches from the doorway with a massive grin. He knows exactly what is happening. To the boy, the world operates at a fraction of the speed. Ryu is left hyperventilating. He checks if his eyeball is still intact. He cannot comprehend how a kid with zero training slipped a full power swing perfectly. Coach K confirms it. This is not a genius. The silhouette of a true predator forms in his mind. The boy is a literal monster. The gym coach watches Ryu in pure disbelief. Ryu's eyes are wide, processing the impossible. We get a look inside Ryu's head. The guy who just got spiritually dismantled. He used to genuinely believe he was the apex predator. A pile of defeated opponents flashes in his memory. His rise to the top was built on an unbroken streak of violence. He loved the sound of bones breaking. He loved the fear in his victims' eyes. His reputation spread through the fighting circles. He took on bigger guys, older guys, entire gangs. A sickening crunch echoes as another lackey falls. He walked away without a scratch every single time, leaving bodies piled on the pavement. The thrill of crushing people created a very specific delusion. He began to think he was the chosen one, a god among regular men. Oh, how the tables have violently turned. The chosen one is currently staring down a shadow he cannot cast a light on. The bully convinces himself it was a fluke. He clutches his face, deciding he must have just slipped. The humiliation fuels a blind rage. He decides to stay light on his feet. He plans to go all out and end this quickly. He considers toying with him using jabs, but he drops his weight instead. He decides a simple knockout isn't enough punishment. He swings with every ounce of kinetic energy his body can generate. He predicts the dodge, aiming right for where the quiet kid's head should be. He thinks he has him trapped, but the quiet kid slips the adjusted punch by a millimeter. Ryu's eyes widen. Impossible is not a word in this kid's vocabulary. The counter is explosive. Ryu's self-proclaimed talent gets completely overwritten by a singular, flawless left hook. The impact sends shockwaves through the air. It hits like a bomb going off in his skull. Suspended in midair, every assumption Ryu held about his own greatness evaporates. He hits the ground with a sickening thud. The quiet kid just stares at the fallen bully. Ryu wakes up screaming in a hospital bed, wrapped entirely in bandages and a neck brace. He hyperventilates, staring at the ceiling. The reality of his situation lands. It wasn't a nightmare. Not a single part of his body was left unbroken. He cannot even wiggle a finger. He realizes exactly what happened. For the first time in his life, Ryu experiences the suffocating taste of total failure. The apex predator is gone. He whimpers in the silent room. All that remains is a teenager crying hot, pathetic tears of defeat. Back at the local gym, a couple of amateurs decide to ask the old man for pointers. They want coaching before they go pro. Coach K ignores them completely. He is a man on a mission. He wants exactly one person. He has never wanted a disciple this badly in his entire career. His assistant complains about Ryu not showing up. Right on cue, the gym doors creak open. The quiet kid walks through the door. Coach K offers him the world of professional boxing. The kid's response is completely deadpan. He has one condition. He wants hospital money to pay for the warehouse brawl. K pieces it together instantly. He stares at the kid who just casually dismantled his favorite prospect. He asks if Ryu at least put up a good fight. The answer is flat, not in the least. The assistant is shocked. K laughs so hard it echoes down the hallway. He considers Ryu old news. He happily offers to buy the entire hospital if that's what it takes to get this boy to sign. They arrive at the hospital to settle the debt. K is thrilled to have his intuition confirmed, but he knows Ryu's pride is permanently shattered. Jay is in the next bed over, covered in bandages, unbroken and focused, the absolute definition of refusing to quit. Coach K visits the boy's apartment to sort out the living arrangements. The place is dreadfully empty, just a mattress on the floor and a stray cat. K asks if he has parents. The boy says no. The coach realizes he hasn't even asked for a name yet. He asks the boy what he is called. The boy stares at the stray cat rubbing against his leg. He introduces himself simply as Yu. Coach K promises to introduce Yu to a whole new world. He believes fate leads everyone on a predestined path. A stark contrast is painted between those chosen for greatness and those easily cast aside. Jay stands in his hospital gown. Ryu glares out his window, bitter and defeated. Only the courageous march forward. Jay looks ready to begin his own journey. The episode title marks a new beginning. Yu packs everything he owns into a single cat carrier. He leaves his old life behind without a second thought. K gets him cleaned up in a public restroom, applying hair gel. A quick styling transforms him from a gloomy ghost into a proper athlete. They arrive at the airport, preparing to leave the country. K spots his assistant waiting at the terminal. They exchange pleasantries amidst the bustling crowd. The assistant offers to take Yu's luggage. Yu declines. Carmen, the manager of the gym, zeroes in on the new recruit. She is sharp, professional, and completely unimpressed by Yu's skinny frame. K didn't just recruit him, he bought him an entire house. A modest place, exactly as requested. With his bags dropped off, they head straight for the gym. The Lions Boxing Club is the mecca of the sport. The local pros are massive, built like brick walls. Their curriculum is purely scientific, heavily funded, and highly exclusive. They take one look at Yu and immediately underestimate him. Carmen tells him to show some respect. Very few fighters are handpicked by Coach K. Yu gives a completely flat response that irritates her to no end. K introduces the top trainer, keeping the tour brief. He points to a wall of portraits. These are the 5 world champions he personally forged. He points to the heavyweight champion, Aaron Tide. The man is a walking natural disaster. K wants Yu to see what it's really like to stand at the top. He tells Carmen to get them front row tickets. He wants Yu to see what a true monster looks like before he becomes one himself. The arena is completely packed. The roar of the crowd shakes the foundations. They sit ringside, right in the splash zone. The champion is not boxing. He is performing a live demolition. A massive right hook connects. The challenger is completely overwhelmed by the raw power. Bones crack under the pressure. He drives the contender into the mat. The referee waves it off immediately. Another challenger gets sent away on a stretcher, joining a very long list of victims. Aaron Tide raises his glove, undisputed and invincible. Coach K leans in as the crowd goes absolutely feral. He tells Yu to listen to the cheers. He promises Yu that one day, that exact sound will be for him. Fame, riches, and the undisputed crown of the world. Back at the gym, Coach K sits in his office. A fiery redhead named Josh demands his attention. Josh wants to be trained directly by the legend. K offers a deal that sounds like a joke. If Josh can even graze the new kid, K will make him a world champion. The rumor spreads through the gym instantly. The pros debate whether the skinny kid can hold up. In the office, Josh is insulted. He is an amateur youth champion. He won tournaments. He beats the pros in sparring. K looks at him with dead eyes and drops a brutal reality check. He tells him guys with his ability are a dime a dozen. He's already met 2 kids this week with more talent. Enraged by the disrespect, Josh vows to crush Yu and prove the old man wrong. K just smiles. He's looking forward to it. Josh warms up, his eyes burning with determination. He steps into the ring, adrenaline pumping. In the corner, Coach K is teaching Yu how to wrap his hands. Josh realizes his opponent doesn't even know the basics. The disrespect levels are off the charts. The crowd of pro boxers gathers around the ropes. Yu looks frail, like a stiff breeze could break his collarbone. But the veterans know better than to question Coach K's eye for talent. It reminds them of when Aaron Tide first arrived. That guy was an anomaly. Josh glares across the mat. The trainer steps in to referee the spar. K asks Yu if he's nervous. Yu is just bored. K gives him his first and only boxing lesson for this round. Do not get hit, ever. Yu nods. That sounds easy enough. They step to the center of the ring. K calls for the bell. The spar begins. Josh closes the distance instantly, throwing a massive right hook. Yu's eyes track the movement effortlessly. He slips the punch. Josh unleashes a furious combination of lefts, rights, and straights. Yu slips every single one of them. He barely moves his feet. The pros watch in disbelief. Josh is fast. His jabs are sharp. Carmen watches, realizing K prioritized speed over power this time. The gym goes dead silent. The kid is dodging a relentless assault without even raising his guard. Josh is throwing everything he has. To him, it feels like fighting a ghost. Yu is standing right there, but the punches keep finding empty air. The onlookers are stunned. Josh refuses to believe it. He can't even graze him. Sweat pours down his face. K's mocking promise echoes in his head. He realizes the old man wasn't exaggerating. He shifts tactics, determined to force an opening. He drops his stance, preparing to lunge. He tries to mix in feints, breaking his rhythm to confuse the opponent. He throws a rapid jab. Yu just stands there. He decides to up the speed and pressure him non-stop. Yu's head tilts a fraction of an inch. The glove sails past his chin. Josh roars in frustration. He throws another heavy cross. The crowd realizes this isn't luck. Yu is reading the subtle shifts in Josh's shoulders. Josh swings until his lungs burn. He worked harder than anyone. He poured his soul into the heavy bag for years. The bell rings. The round ends. Josh is hyperventilating, completely drained. Yu hasn't even broken a sweat. Coach K watches with cold calculation. He notes that Josh has great footwork, power, and accuracy, the result of exhaustive hours of training. But that's exactly the problem. That's his limit. K believes mediocre excellence is a tragedy because it gives false hope against true, God-given talent. The trainer calls them back to their corners. Josh is gasping for air. K turns to Yu and delivers the second lesson. Hit the chin, and they go down. Dodge and punch. He demonstrates the motion. To K, that is the sum total of boxing. While regular fighters need complex combinations, a true genius creates their own optimized style naturally. K refuses to ruin Yu's instincts with generic coaching. Let the monster build its own style. Josh glares from his corner, refusing to quit. Round 2 begins. Josh knows his only advantage is endurance. Yu has no conditioning. If Josh can drag the fight out, he might have a chance. Endurance only comes with effort. He remembers his grueling runs. He could tell Yu was slightly exhausted at the end of the first round. He decides to play it slow, conserving energy while keeping the pressure on. K watches, knowing exactly how this ends. Josh steps forward. Yu steps in. Fast. Lethal. Josh hits the canvas before he even registers the movement. The trainer yells his name. When Josh wakes up, the gym is quiet. Yu tells him it was a nice try. The crushing weight of reality sets in. He gave everything to this sport, and a complete novice dismantled him in 3 seconds. He sits alone in the ring. Yu asks if he wants another round. Josh just stares at the mat. He snaps. He curses Yu out, entirely humiliated. He tells the genius to take his talent and leave him alone. Yu turns to leave, but before he does, Josh asks a question. Who is stronger, Yu, I, or the white-haired prodigy back home? Josh wants to know if there's an even bigger monster out there. Yu doesn't think of Ryu. He thinks of Jay, standing bruised but unbroken. He answers that the stronger one is probably the kid who refuses to stay down. Josh is left processing the harsh truth. 2 years pass. Peter Kent, a sports reporter looking for a scoop, digs for information on Coach K's final protege. The entire boxing world wants an exclusive. He discovers that for 2 straight years, Yu has done absolutely zero traditional boxing training, just pure endurance running. The results are undeniable. Yu runs through the city, his stamina off the charts. The frail kid is gone. Yu's physique is now carved from stone. His debut opponent is announced John Taker, a lightweight with 9 wins and 7 losses. K selected him very carefully. Taker is known as the rookie killer for a very specific reason. He specializes in a filthy infighting technique. The press knows K wouldn't pick him without a reason. Carmen expresses concern over Yu's lack of sparring. K dismisses it. He knows what he built. Taker destroys a heavy bag. He practices his signature move. He throws rough hooks while wrapping his opponent in a wrestler-style hold. The fans call it the headlock hook. It's dirty, and it crushes the dreams of technical fighters. His massive punching power makes it lethal. Peter Kent arrives at Taker's gym for an interview. Taker is surprised anyone cares about him, but he realizes they just want a headline about him sacrificing himself to the new prodigy. He decides to give them exactly what they want. Peter notes that Taker's chaotic style is the absolute worst matchup for a nervous rookie. Taker lives up to his villainous villainous persona. He openly mocks the concept of elite training and pristine records. He loves nothing more than the look of despair on a genius's face. Taker claims that playing by the rules makes you a wimp. In his world, there are only two rules: dead or alive. Peter laughs, thoroughly entertained. Taker promises to chew the kid up and spit him out. Up on the roof, Taker's coach asks if he really thinks he can win. Taker drops the bravado. He admits the trash talk was just to provoke the opponent. He knows anything can happen in the ring. Fight night. The press swarms the hallway. They want to know if Yu is an outboxer. Carmen expertly blocks them. No interviews until after the match. Taker sits in the waiting room, feeding on the nervous energy. The official calls his name. It's showtime. Taker steps out of the tunnel into the flashing lights. The crowd heavily boos the King of Fouls. Taker just grins. The commentators hype the match. Everyone is waiting to see the final masterpiece of Coach K's career. Yu walks out, silent, cold, completely unbothered by the screaming masses. K slips through the ropes, ready to unleash his weapon. Yu stares blankly ahead. Peter Kent watches closely. A fighter who only trained endurance for 2 years is a massive gamble. Yu stands in his corner, a void of emotion. Taker's coach gives the final game plan: close the distance and force the infight. Coach K tells Yu to do exactly as they practiced. No more, no less. The referee signals the start of the match. They step to the center of the ring. Peter Kent wonders if the rookie will crack under pressure. Yu's eyes remain dead. Taker plans a welcoming hazing. He's going to pretend to tap gloves and throw a cheap shot. But the moment he looks at Yu, his entire nervous system locks up. The terror hits him instantly. It is a type of fear he hasn't felt since his darkest days in the back alleys. Staring at Yu feels exactly like staring down the barrel of a loaded gun. Taker realizes he can't use his normal tricks. The referee steps back. The bell rings. Taker lunges, but Yu is already moving. A thin, clean line of blood opens on Taker's cheek. Coach K watches with a wicked grin. He planned this perfectly. Yu unleashes a blinding flurry of punches. They move too fast for the eye to track. K's pre-fight instruction is revealed: do not end the fight quickly. He wants Yu to intentionally miss slightly, turning his opponent into a canvas. The crowd is stunned by the invisible strikes. Taker blacks out for a fraction of a second. When his vision returns, blood is pouring onto his shoes. The referee jumps in and violently halts the match. The commentators scream as they realize what just happened. The ringside physician rushes in to inspect Taker's face. The doctor has 21 years of experience, and he is genuinely horrified. He examines the wounds closely. Normally, boxing gloves cause blunt force trauma, but Taker's face looks like it was sliced by a scalpel. The cuts are impossibly clean. The physics of it simply do not make sense. He swallows hard, terrified of the kid in the opposite corner. Yu stands perfectly still, waiting. Because there is no structural damage to the bones or eyes, the doctor clears Taker to continue. The referee asks Taker if he wants to stop. Taker's pride flares up. He refuses. He screams that a few scratches won't put him down. The match resumes. Taker realizes the horrible truth. Boxing is supposed to be a structured sport where skill meets skill, but fighting Yu feels entirely different. There is zero restraint. It triggers a deeply buried memory in Taker, the kind of emotionless violence he barely survived in his youth. He curses his luck for running into another monster. Yu steps in and lands a brutal 3-hit combo. Taker coughs up blood as another blow slips right through his guard. He tries to bob and weave, but Yu predicts every movement, hitting him perfectly at the apex of his dodges. Desperation kicks in. Taker swings wildly. He throws a massive left hook. Yu's eyes track the sloppy attack. Another surgical strike opens a new gash on Taker's head. Taker realizes that even a world champion couldn't block these punches. And worse, he realizes Yu is intentionally holding back the knockout blow. The sheer force of a blocked punch drills straight through Taker's forearms. The impact rattles his skull. For the first time in his professional career, John Taker genuinely believes he is going to die. The commentators realize they aren't watching a prodigy. They are watching a devil. The crowd descends into a frenzied madness. The raw display of absolute domination is intoxicating. Taker knows he has to stop Yu's footwork, or the fight is over. He decides to break the rules entirely. He aims for the foot. He stomps down hard, trying to cripple his movement. Yu reads the foul play instantly and punishes him with another blinding cut. The crowd erupts, mocking the King of Fouls for failing to even land a cheap shot. Taker refuses to fold. He absorbs the damage, pushing himself straight into Yu's immediate attack range. Taker's coach notes that while Yu has godlike reflexes, he cannot dodge effectively from this close. A flashback reveals the sad truth of John Taker's career. He was never a star. He was a discarded fighter kept around to build up the records of better prospects. His final role as an amateur was to be a sacrifice for Isaac Dresner, Dronzer, an Olympic gold medalist. Taker knew he was brought in to lose, but boxing was his life. It was the only thing that kept him out of the gutter. He refused to just lay down. The memory of tapping gloves with Dronzer shifts back to the brutal reality of the ring. Taker believed that a fight wasn't over until the final bell, but the Dronzer match was a bleak massacre. He thought his dirty infighting would level the playing field, but against true greatness, even his best tricks were completely worthless. And history is violently repeating itself right now. John Taker stands perfectly still, realizing his fate has already been written. The eyes staring back at him hold zero malice, zero anger, and zero mercy. For Taker, boxing was never about glory. It was about surviving the next 3 minutes. He forces his way inside the guard, throwing an ugly, desperate hook. The veteran eats a massive counter directly to the chin in return, but he refuses to drop, driven by a deeply ingrained need to just keep fighting. Throwing another desperate counter, he claws for another day in the ring. Growing up, his life was a relentless cycle of stealing or being stolen from, betraying or being betrayed. He led a miserable, dangerous life constantly on the edge of a blade. The boxing gym was his only salvation. When his coach patted his head and told him he did well, everything changed. For the first time in his miserable life, Taker basked in the warmth of a radiant world. He drops his weight, locking the opponent's arm and head in a brutal bind. The headlock hook, a dirty, crushing equalizer against men with vastly superior talent. A knockdown that nobody in the arena anticipated. Even Taker himself was shocked that his filthy trick actually worked. The elite opponent managed to stand back up, but the psychological game had turned. Humiliation from a street tactic makes polished fighters impatient and sloppy. And just like that, Taker secured his miraculous win. Two men who know they don't belong at the top. Looking out at the city, his coach admits the dark truth. The association wants to commodify his villainous persona for ticket sales. In this, they promise to up his prize money if he fully embraces the role of the bad guy. Taker laughs it off, accepting the role gladly. He rationalizes that the world needs villains just as much as it needs heroes. His coach watches him lean against the concrete, his heart aching for his fighter, knowing full well that not everyone gets to live their life in the clean, bright limelight. Taker has been officially designated as the sport's sacrificial sinner. The coach knows Taker deeply admires the clean, technical boxing of true champions. He knows exactly how much the man suffers in silence after every foul-filled match. A foul is still a foul, and the guilt eats at Taker constantly. But despite the moral weight, the coach made a silent vow. If Taker chooses to stand on that bloody stage, he will scream his lungs out, supporting him. He will always be on his side. Armed with that absolute support, Taker throws everything he has at the cold-blooded rookie. Yu watches the telegraphed attack approach with hollow eyes. Taker refuses to back off, fully committing his entire body to the swing. But sheer willpower cannot rewrite the laws of physics. Yu strikes with surgical precision, targeting the exact weakest point of Taker's extended knuckle. The bones shatter instantly under the impact. A fine mist of blood erupts into the air. The final explosive right hand lands with devastating finality. Taker's consciousness unplugs before he even begins to fall. His coach watches the execution in sheer paralyzed terror. Taker crashes into the canvas, a broken heap of tribal ink and shattered pride. The referee steps in immediately, realizing the fight is over. The audience cannot comprehend the terrifying efficiency of what they just witnessed. The coach screams over the ropes, begging his fighter to get back up. Internally, he admits he wanted to throw the towel in a long time ago. He wanted to tell Taker to stop letting himself be used as an expendable commodity, but paralyzed by his own ineptitude, the words never left his throat. Taker twitches weakly on the blood-soaked mat. He silently thanks the old man for everything he ever did for him. Yu stands perfectly still over his fallen opponent, waiting for the inevitable count. The referee reaches the count of 8. Through swollen, bloody lips, Taker tells his coach there is no need to be sorry. He just wanted to stand in the ring like a real boxer. Sliding fully into unconsciousness, he leaves nothing left to give. So the match is officially over, an appalling, bloody spectacle that leaves the front rows visibly shaken. The commentators announce it to the world. The devil himself has debuted. Watching quietly from the tunnel is a figure who understands exactly what this means. The reigning king of the lightweight division. The way Yu systematically demolished the headlock hook was deeply shocking. Using a perfectly timed hook to counter an incoming hook is almost mathematically impossible. He calculated the skeletal integrity of his opponent mid-swing and broke him. His reaction speed and accuracy simply transcend human limits. Coach K has finally found the absolute pinnacle of his coaching career, but the observer in the tunnel finds the entire display intoxicating. The arrival of a true giant is bound to make massive waves. The amateur champion Josh feels a strange, heavy sense of relief. He realizes his dream of standing at the top was never actually achievable anyway. For some, a monster's appearance shatters all hope, but for others, the spark of Yu's dominance turns into an absolute inferno. Jay bursts into a rundown boxing club, his eyes burning with new resolve. He wants to step into the ring and make his friend proud. The training begins with a terrifying, unhinged ferocity, sweating through every grueling drill his coach throws at him. screaming that he can push harder, hit faster, forcing his body past the point of total exhaustion. The quiet kid's victory ignited something borderline obsessive in Jay. At the Lions Boxing Club, Coach K watches the broadcast replay in his office. The old man is incredibly pleased with the massacre he orchestrated, so turning to his staff, he issues a blunt warning about what comes next. Yu is a born gangster in the ring, a wild, untamable variable. The prodigy stands over a pile of rival enforcers, hands dripping with fresh blood. His unprecedented rise will make the orthodox fighters deeply jealous. A tall man steps inside, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. The undisputed light division world champion, Jean-Pierre Manuel, has come to see the rookie. Meanwhile, in a dark room filled with garbage, a giant swallows a slice of pizza whole. He watches the television broadcast of Yu's victory through half-lidded eyes. Laughing, he displays a row of jagged, shark-like teeth. He proudly declares that the Rookie of the Year title actually belongs to him. At the Boxing Association, the office is buzzing with anticipation for the lightweight division. While Yu made headlines, another boxer has been quietly pulling off miraculous upsets. Qasim Al-Jahad, the wealthy grandson of a global conglomerate leader, but his terrifying performance immediately eclipsed the novelty of his bank account. The heavy doors to the gym are violently kicked open. Qasim announces his arrival with a booming, maniacal laugh. He is currently obese, out of shape, and aggressively unbothered. His personal trainer screams at him for disappearing on a 2-month junk food bender. Qasim ignores the nagging entirely. He just wants to hit something. Casually waving massive bags of cash, he offers 10 grand to anyone willing to spar. The gym manager remembers being floored when this giant first showed up. Qasim firmly and violently rejected the notion of this being a hobby. He came for the world championship belt, and nothing less. They threw him into the ring, fully expecting the local pros to humble him quickly. The result was an appalling bloodbath. Despite carrying an absurd amount of extra weight, his unique style remained lethal. Qasim moves with an alarming, beast-like speed. Delivering a brutal counter, he flat-out defies basic boxing mechanics. He casually obliterates every single orthodox boxer in the building. His technique is an insult to the sport. It deeply offends the traditionalists. He leaves his face unguarded, ignoring defense altogether, and still manages to crush his opponents into the mat with ease. All the modern boxing techniques they spent years perfecting are rendered useless. There isn't even a proper name for the chaotic looping swings he throws. The trainer hates to admit it, but the reality unfolding in the ring is undeniable. Qasim possesses a special talent that simply cannot be taught in a gym. Pure, unrestrained physical superiority masquerading as a joke. He knocks out his 20th opponent of the afternoon without breaking a sweat. A boxer mighty enough to upend the established order of the world has been born. 2 weeks pass, and Qasim continues his rampage through the heavy bags. Exactly 1,000 bags destroyed. He finishes his session and laughs, refreshed and energized. In just 14 days, he burned off every ounce of excess pizza fat. His body naturally defaults to the physique of a shredded wild beast. He eats, sleeps, and goofs off as much as he pleases without consequence. Yet his savage nature makes him the ultimate contender for the lightweight throne. In a small, cramped apartment across town, a kettle boils on a cheap stove. Jay, looking younger and smaller, sits at a worn table eating potato soup. His father quietly apologizes for the repetitive, cheap meals. Jay smiles brightly and lies, saying he loves potato soup. The father mentally calculates his grueling construction pay, wondering if he can afford a treat. If he wins his next local boxing match, maybe he can finally buy his son some real steak. Back in the present, it is the day before the title eliminator. Qasim crashes Coach K's gym, loudly demanding to see the boy named Yu. Playfully groping the legendary coach, he shows zero respect for his legacy. Coach K evaluates his muscles instantly. The man is built precisely like a wild stallion. The coach smiles a wicked smile. He is going to thoroughly enjoy watching this giant get destroyed. He tells the wild dog to go fetch his opponent by the river. Yu is quietly running his daily roadwork, unaware of the visit. A red blur violently intercepts him on the path. Qasim grabs Yu's fist mid-jog, forcing him to stop. He formally declares himself the man who will dominate the entire lightweight division. Leaning in uncomfortably close, he mockingly asks why Yu fights with such a depressing face. For Qasim, the violence of the ring is nothing but pure, exhilarating fun. He promises to take the championship belt, leaving Yu staring blankly. When Qasim fights officially, it looks exactly like his chaotic gym brawls. He throws a massive overhead hook that leaves his ribs exposed to a counter. His veteran opponent curses him for being a completely crazy bastard, but the crazy bastard lands the hit first, ending the exchange immediately. The traditional fighters cannot compute the geometry of his movements. He treats the deadly sport like a simple, joyful frolic. Another devastating, physics-defying swing connects cleanly on a jaw. The crowd erupts as Qasim forces another disciplined opponent to his knees using brute force. Later, Qasim watches the broadcast of Yu's matches alongside his massive entourage. He genuinely believes Yu is attacking multiple places at once. Coach K notes that Qasim's terrible stance breaks the flow of kinetic energy, but his beast-like physical ability ability effortlessly overrides his mechanical flaws. In the ring, Qasim's current opponent miraculously manages to stand back up. Qasim smiles a jagged smile. It is time to drop the charade. He loads up a massive punch from a distance that shouldn't mathematically connect. The opponent prepares a standard counter, betting his life on Qasim's terrible accuracy. But Qasim doesn't care about accuracy. He just cares about delivering blunt force trauma. The sheer velocity of the wild swing tears straight through the opponent's raised guard. Hitting the mat out cold, the fight ends before the referee can even begin the count. Qasim raises his gloves, soaking in the deafening adoration of the crowd. He looks down at the fallen fighter with pure condescension. He warned him not to take a street fight lightly. His opponents are left hyperventilating in the corners. Another fight, another flawless victory for you. Qasim mows down every orthodox boxer the association puts in his path. The referee holds up Qasim's hand once again, cementing his undefeated streak. It didn't take long for Yu and Qasim to hijack the entire lightweight division. Yu executes his opponents with terrifyingly simple and clean moves. Qasim dominates with unconventional animal-like ferocity. After another bloody win, Qasim violently steals the microphone from the ring announcer. He openly declares his absolute desire for the championship belt. First, he promises to crush the gloomy kid named Yu. The crowd goes feral at the call-out. Coach K is practically vibrating with joy. This is exactly the narrative he wanted to build, a perfectly built villain to sacrifice on the altar of his ultimate masterpiece. The gym manager admits he hated Qasim at first, but now he is captivated by the show. The giant possesses a rare charisma that shakes up everything around him, and traditionalists stubbornly call his wild style a ridiculous, unsustainable circus act. But his supporters argue he is the undeniable genius who will bring a paradigm shift to human evolution. Qasim unapologetically blazes his trail, seating himself firmly on a self-made throne. Elsewhere, Yu continues his silent training, systematically destroying a heavy bag. Coach K formally informs him that his next opponent is the red-haired maniac. It is the final, ultimate test before the championship bout. The day of the match arrives, and the stadium is packed to the rafters with screaming fans. The winner gets a guaranteed shot at the undisputed world title. Sitting silently in the front row is the reigning champion, Jean-Pierre Manuel. Qasim's trainer reminds his fighter that a win today guarantees a title shot tomorrow. Qasim laughs. A mere belt won't satisfy him. He plans to conquer the entire world. The champion watches with cold, calculating eyes, looking for a worthy challenger. In the opposite corner, Coach K gives Yu a final, subtle nod of approval. The most anticipated match of the year is finally about to begin. Qasim comes armed with a fierce, unrestrained, psychotic intensity. Yu comes primed with the cold, dead composure of a sniper. Qasim confidently saunters to the exact center of the ring. Prowling around his silent opponent, he grins like a predator looking at a free meal. The tension in the arena is suffocating as the bell rings. Qasim drops his hands and demands Yu throw the first punch. He claims traditional jabs are far too prim and proper. Yu steps forward without a word. A flash of movement happens that is too fast for the human eye to track. Qasim feels the air physically shift violently around his face. The trainer immediately realizes something is terribly wrong. Coach K's voice echoes in his memory. Don't hold yourself back today. Yu bypasses Qasim's non-existent guard. The heavy bags in the gym couldn't withstand Yu's raw power, pushing his body until it simply gave out. Screaming in agony, he pushed through endless exhaustion just to satisfy the old coach, drilling the bag until his knuckles literally bled. All of that silent suffering is contained in this single, devastating strike. Yu's fist drills straight into the center of Qasim's face. Qasim's eyes roll back in sheer, unadulterated shock. Someone whose time flows at a completely different, elevated speed, or someone with extreme, deeply ingrained, animal-like instincts. Qasim's wild instincts scream at him to pull away, sacrificing a clean hit to avoid a total knockout. The resulting pain of the grazing blow is agonizing. Qasim's stallion-like muscles absorb the brunt of the damage, but the toll is incredibly heavy. The crowd watches the self-proclaimed king get battered around like a live sandbag. Yu does not give him a single second to breathe. He follows up immediately. A devastating combination heavily rattles Qasim's skull. The commentators scream as Qasim is hunted across the ring. The trainer realizes Yu has been hiding his true potential this entire time. Qasim gasps for air, disoriented and bleeding. His brain desperately tries to process why his unstoppable strength is failing him. He looks at the emotionless void standing quietly before him. For the very first time in his life, Qasim deeply understands that this is not a game. Sheer panic firmly replaces the arrogance. The instinct of the wild beast screams a single primal command: escape. Scrambling to the far corner, he grows desperate for distance. Coach K laughs out loud, thoroughly enjoying the breakdown. The trainer demands Qasim raise his non-existent guard. It is a pathetic pathetic attempt at a structured defense. Yu strikes again, relentless and terrifyingly precise. Qasim's head snaps back violently. The trainer realizes he never taught the wild beast how to actually defend himself. He traps Qasim tightly in the corner, turning the so-called king into a helpless victim. Qasim wails as another precise blow lands. The trainer watches the slaughter in sheer disbelief. He realizes his fatal mistake. Blinded by the hype, he never actually taught his fighter how to raise a guard. Yu's hollow eyes offer no reprieve. Qasim grabs the top rope, his legs giving out completely. The audience erupts into confused murmurs as they witness the impossible. Qasim al-Jahad, the mighty challenger, is trying to climb over the ropes to physically escape the ring. His trainer screams at him, furious, terrified, and humiliated. The reality of his failure finally sets in, but the match is not over, and the monster in the ring is definitely not done with him yet. Qasim's trainer screams from the corner, desperately trying to snap his fighter back to reality, but reality is exactly what broke him. The sheer difference in power is a physical weight he cannot lift. The wild beast of the lightweight division looks at Yu and sees a void he cannot punch his way out of. He stares into the hollow eyes of a true monster. The arrogance that fueled his entire career simply evaporates. Those red eyes, once filled with violent joy, are now completely dilated with panic. Survival overrides every other instinct in his body. He turns his back on the match and scrambles over the ropes to escape the ring. His trainer breaks down, crying, realizing he pushed his fighter straight into a meat grinder. The referee waves it off. A TKO victory at 1 minute and 32 seconds. Yu's expression remains completely dead. He looks like he just finished a light jog. Sebastian laughs hysterically at the sheer absurdity of the outcome. And just like that, Qasim al-Jahad is never seen in a professional ring ever again. A kettle boils in a small apartment across the city. Jay sits on the worn couch, dedicating every free moment to studying boxing theory. His father arrives home with a bruised face and a warm smile, proudly holding dinner. While Jay finds joy in his meager life, Yu finds absolutely nothing in his victories. The newly crowned #1 contender lives a life devoid of celebration. Coach K visits the apartment to deliver his instructions. He orders the boy to rest, assuming his body accumulated hidden stress from the brutal title eliminator. The coach bought him a massive house, but it still feels completely vacant. Yu doesn't even unpack properly. He just sits on the couch, letting his cat crawl over his lap. He turns on the television, flipping through the channels aimlessly. With nothing holding his attention, he decides to venture outside. His cat yawns, utterly unbothered by the existential dread radiating from its owner. Yu wanders into a brightly lit local arcade. He encounters an older man locked in intense focus. The veteran has dedicated 30 years of his life to mastering the sport of air hockey. The scoreboard flashes a flawless victory. The old man spots Yu watching and immediately recognizes the dead-eyed focus of a true competitor. He aggressively challenges the kid to step up to the table. He believes he has finally found the chosen genius to lead an air hockey revolution. Yu flatly declines. He explains that he doesn't have any hospital bills that need paying off right now, and with that, he casually walks away. Indiana Jackson, president of the U.S. Air Hockey Association, is left completely heartbroken. Moving on to a rhythm game, Yu stares at the cascading notes. He treats the controls like a basic reaction test, securing a perfect score on the hardest difficulty. The hardcore gamers gathered behind him are left questioning their entire existence. A fighting game enthusiast sweats profusely as his combos are effortlessly dismantled. He cannot comprehend how a complete novice is blocking his most advanced techniques. Yu doesn't even use combinations. He just reads the digital frames and reacts with basic inputs. He switches to a piano rhythm game, sighing heavily. To him, the highest speed settings just feel like waiting around. As the sun begins to set, he retreats to a park bench, entirely detached from the bustling world. He watches a family walk by, completely alien to the concept of simple happiness. The sky shifts into a deep orange. A young fan spots him and runs over, absolutely vibrating with excitement. He recognizes Yu from the television broadcast and cannot contain his awe. Pulling out a notepad, the kid eagerly demands an autograph. Yu stares blankly and replies that he doesn't have a signature. The kid insists, begging him to just make something up. So Yu grabs the pen and writes 2 massive block letters across the page. The kid doesn't care about the lack of effort. He thinks it is the coolest thing in the world. He enthusiastically praises Yu for completely destroying the wild redhead in the ring. Internally, Yu finds the entire interaction deeply annoying. The boy asks if he is going to fight the champion soon. Yu gives a non-committal shrug. The kid firmly believes his new idol will take the belt with ease. He asks if that means Yu will officially become the strongest man on the planet. Yu looks at the boy's shining eyes and decides to drop a soul-crushing dose of pure nihilism. He coldly states that there is absolutely nothing good about being strong, because no matter how perfectly you can dodge a punch, you will still die if a car hits you. You will die a brutal death if a lion catches you in the wild. The kid's smile immediately vanishes. Trying to salvage his dream, the boy shouts that he will just become strong enough to beat a lion. Yu effortlessly parries the logic, explaining that even the strongest men die when they catch a disease. He stares directly into the terrified child's soul and promises him that his parents will eventually pass away, and inevitably his own clock will run out too. Adding a final layer of bleakness, he notes that people can always just choose to end it early if they get tired of waiting. He reiterates his main point: seeking strength is a pointless endeavor. The kid trembles, processing the overwhelming weight of human mortality. He turns and sprints away, wailing at the top of his lungs, completely traumatized. Yu sits alone again, unfazed by the psychological damage he just inflicted. The streetlights flicker on as night falls over the city. He begins the quiet walk back to his empty house. He moves through the world like a ghost, haunting his own life. The two-story house stands silent in the dark. His cat greets him at the stairs, the only creature that demands nothing from him. Looking down at the animal, he softly hopes it lives a long, uncomplicated life. He retreats to his bedroom, lying on the mattress in total darkness. Curling up with the cat, he waits for the morning to arrive. But across the world, another pair of eyes snaps open in the dark. A man with long black hair sits perfectly still in the center of a boxing ring, deep in meditation. Enter Jean-Pierre Manuel, the undisputed king of the lightweight division. Sitting at a luxurious dining table, his gorgeous wife Stella glares at him with boiling frustration. She screams at him for ignoring the meal she prepared, but Jean's eyes remain completely vacant. He isn't even in the room. Stella grinds her teeth, realizing she is competing against an obsession she cannot fight. His mind is entirely occupied by the colossal shadow of his own athletic perfection. Later at her office, Stella aggressively types at her keyboard, trying to distract herself. She stretches her arms, exhausted by the emotional toll of her marriage. Looking out the window, she has a perfect view into the Lions Boxing Club courtyard. Down below, Yu is relentlessly grinding through his shadow boxing routine. She sips her coffee, noting the rookie's obsessive work ethic. Most professionals take extensive rest periods after a bout to let their muscles recover, but this kid operates on a completely different set of biological rules. He moves with terrifying speed, cutting through the air like a machine. Stella watches him perform the exact same routine day in and day out without a single misstep. She genuinely wonders if Coach K recruited a cyborg. In the 2 years he has trained there, she has never seen a single emotion cross his face. He hasn't made a single friend or shown interest in anything outside the gym. She knows that his inevitable trajectory points straight toward her husband's championship belt. Placing them side by side in her mind, she realizes they share a deeply unsettling, identical aura. But Yu feels distinctly more empty. She realizes that even if he conquers the entire world, the victory won't bring him a single ounce of joy. She cannot imagine him ever looking happy. Jean-Pierre sits completely motionless on the canvas, his breathing slowed to a barely perceptible rhythm. His manager, a distinguished man with a prominent mustache, watches closely from ringside. He notes that Jean has been spending significantly more time in deep meditation recently. The catalyst for this shift is entirely obvious. The anomaly named Yu has finally captured the champion's attention. The manager asks for a status report on his physical condition. John replies that it is excellent, but for a man obsessed with his craft, excellent is simply not an acceptable standard. He demands to undergo a final, grueling stress test before the bout. 3 massive heavyweight sparring partners step into the ring, ready to push the champion to his absolute limits. Coach K gathers Yu and Carmen in his office to break down the champion's previous title defense. The footage rolls, showing Jean-Pierre facing off against the #1 ranked contender. Coach K pauses the tape, explaining the global hierarchy of the sport. There are currently 5 active pound-for-pound elite boxers on the planet, spanning across multiple weight classes, representing the absolute pinnacle of human combat, including K's own masterpiece, the unstoppable Aaron Tide. But among all of those legendary fighters, Jean-Pierre holds a very specific distinction. Winning the world title at age 20, he has maintained a flawless, undefeated record for 10 straight years. Coach K points out the first devastating weapon in his arsenal, his seemingly casual left fist. By keeping his lead hand extended directly at his opponent's eye level, he creates a persistent physical barrier. From Jean's perspective, the target remains perfectly clear, but from the challenger's viewpoint, the oversized glove completely blocks their line of sight and corrupts their depth perception. All Jean has to do is hold that position, and he inherently dictates the entire flow of the match. This tactic is only possible because of his absurd, genetically gifted 79-inch arm reach. Coach K brutally notes that this is 6 full inches longer than Yu's own reach, but the mathematical measurement doesn't tell the whole terrifying story. When combined with his blinding hand speed and aggressive footwork, the perceived threat range of his jabs functionally extends to over 118 inches. No boxer can escape his zone of control. They are trapped in his web from the opening bell to the final count. Furthermore, the kinetic energy generated by his velocity turns his simple jabs into armor-piercing straight punches. Coach K demands Yu mentally place himself in the challenger's shoes. The opponent in the footage is sweating profusely, completely completely locked down by the relentless pressure. Fighting Jean-Pierre is like fighting a master fencer who controls the entire arena with the tip of his blade. The challenger absorbs a brutal flurry of blows, unable to find a single gap in the defense. The sheer weight of the jabs shatters his guard. Driven by pure desperation, the opponent roars and forces his way inside the kill zone. Dropping into a cross-armed crab guard, he tries to block the incoming fire and secure a close-range brawl. John's eyes track the movement perfectly. He expected this exact countermeasure. The opponent unleashes a massive overhand right, betting his entire career on a single connection. Coach K grins. This is where the champion separates himself from the rest of the world. Jean-Pierre does not panic. He doesn't even flinch. He executes a flawless shoulder roll, slipping the heavy punch by a fraction of an inch. Using the rotational momentum, he instantly fires a devastating counter directly into the opponent's exposed ribs. The impact echoes through the arena as the challenger's momentum is brutally halted. The air leaves the opponent's lungs. His eyes roll back in sheer agony. Before the body even begins to drop, Jean slides his lead foot back, resetting his center of gravity. Coach K breaks down the sequence. A slip, a body blow to pin the target, and an immediate retreat. It is the absolute pinnacle of outboxing technique, executed in less than a second. IK admits there are only two fighters on the planet capable of moving with that level of mechanical perfection: the reigning champion and the silent monster sitting in front of him. As the opponent recovers, Jean extends his right fist instead of his left. He seamlessly switches into a southpaw stance, completely rewriting the geometry of the fight. The challenger prepares for a straight right, absolutely certain of the angle, but he gets tagged by a blinding right jab instead. The moment the opponent adjusts his defense for the southpaw assault, Jean switches back to orthodox. He is perfectly ambidextrous, treating both sides of his body as identical, lethal weapons. The challenger's mind completely breaks. He cannot gauge the distance, the timing, or the angle of the attacks. Coach K explains the psychology of the slaughter. Jean is intentionally planting seeds of total despair. The opponent is trapped in the dark, absorbing a relentless 5-hit combination without any hope of defending himself. The match ends exactly like all the others, a perfect, flawless victory. Coach K leans back in his chair. He wants you to understand that this man views boxing as an exact science. The broadcast cuts to the post-match interview. The reporter praises the overwhelmingly dominant performance. Jean takes the microphone, his face locked in a mask of deep dissatisfaction. He publicly admits that his footwork and weight distribution were slightly uncoordinated in the third round. The reporter stammers, confused by the champion's harsh self-criticism. Jean ignores him, staring directly into the camera lens to issue a formal challenge to the rookie anomaly. Coach K laughs out loud. Qasim was a fun distraction, an arrogant brute relying on animal instincts. But Jean-Pierre is a true artist, a man who will ceaselessly grind his own bones to dust just to reach the absolute summit. The scene shifts to Jean standing alone in a pitch-black room. He begins his physical conditioning. The muscles in his calves clench like steel cables. He drops into a low stance, pushing off the floor with concussive force. The sheer speed of his shadowboxing creates shockwaves that tear through the empty space. The broadcast replay shows the final moments of the title eliminator match. Qasim's cowardly escape cements his permanent disqualification from the sport. Yu's arm is raised, officially crowning him as the undisputed #1 contender. Jean watches the footage from his estate, his blue eyes locked onto his future prey. He whispers a single word of genuine admiration: beautiful. He recognizes a fellow anomaly, a creature that operates outside the normal boundaries of human limitation. The next morning, Jean sits in his luxurious dining room, pouring black coffee with mechanical precision. Stella watches him from across the table, her eyes red from lack of sleep and mounting frustration. Unable to take the crushing silence any longer, Stella screams his name. She demands to know why he is constantly zoning out, treating her like a piece of the furniture. She accuses him of being lost in his violent obsession yet again. Tears prick the corners of her eyes as she begs for a single shred of emotional validation. She asks if he even loves her anymore. Jean finally looks at her and flatly states that her incessant talking is incredibly annoying. A sports reporter visits the manager's office for an exclusive profile piece on the elusive king. The manager describes Jean as an artist. The reporter chuckles, slightly skeptical of the dramatic phrasing. He asks if they can get a sneak peek at the physical conditioning that keeps Jean on the throne. The manager agrees, but warns them that they won't be able to comprehend everything they see. They enter the gym. Jean is sitting dead center in the ring, legs crossed, eyes closed. The reporter notes that the rumors about the champion's pre-workout meditation were completely true. A brief flashback features a punk rock boxer who used to share the training facility. The punk vividly remembers thinking the champion was completely out of his mind. Sometimes he meditated for an hour, sometimes for the entire afternoon, completely ignoring the noise of the gym. But the meditation wasn't the craziest part. When Jean finally stood up, his shadowboxing defied logic. He would step into a stance and freeze, locking his muscles into place like a marble statue. The punk boxer would hit the heavy bag for 20 minutes, look over, and Jean had only moved his arm a few inches. He would go spar for an hour, come back, and Jean was still in the middle of executing the exact same same motion. It took him weeks to finally realize what the champion was actually doing. He was breaking down a single, basic jab into microscopic, frame-by-frame increments, taking an entire hour to fully extend his arm to ensure absolute, flawless, biomechanical execution. The punk concludes his story, confirming that Jean-Pierre is a certified psychopath. Back in the present, the reporter questions the scientific validity of the meditation, assuming it is just a relaxation technique. The manager corrects him instantly. It is the exact opposite of relaxation. It is a grueling mental exercise designed to hyper-awaken his nervous system and sharpen his senses to a razor's edge. He asks the reporter if he has ever experienced a state of absolute, unbreakable flow. The manager explains that in that state, all external distractions burn away, leaving only the target in vivid focus. John meditates to manually trigger that exact state, holding it for hours at a time. Offering a practical demonstration, the manager invites the reporter to sit in the ring and try it himself. The reporter slips his shoes off and sits cross-legged on the canvas directly across from the anomaly. The instructions are incredibly simple. Get comfortable, close your eyes, and focus entirely on the present moment. The reporter complies, taking a deep breath and trying to clear his scattered thoughts. Sitting this close, he can tangibly feel the heavy, suffocating aura radiating off the champion's body. He pushes deeper into the silence, seeking the absolute present. A faint, rhythmic sound echoes in his ears. He realizes the present isn't completely silent after all. The manager asks if he can feel his pulse. The reporter opens his eyes, shocked by the sudden internal clarity. The heavy thumping of his own heart feels massive, drowning out everything else. The manager smiles, noting that the deeper you focus, the more vivid the internal machinery becomes. The demonstration is over. He explains the terrifying reality of the champion's mind. If an untrained civilian can isolate the sound of their own heartbeat after 3 minutes of basic focus, then imagine the hypersensory overload experienced by a man who has practiced this discipline every day for a decade. This intense connection grants him total conscious command over every single muscle fiber from his fingertips to his toes. The scene transitions to the dark city skyline. The manager approaches the ring as Gene finally opens his eyes, ending his session. Sean admits that Yu's strange, erratic timing has forced him to push his focus even deeper. To counter a monster who operates on a different perception of time, John demands more intense stimulation to test his limits. The manager cries out in protest. He admits he tried to talk the champion out of this reckless exercise, but failed. 3 massive sparring partners enter the ring. They draw heavy rubber combat knives and drop into fighting stances. Gene stares at them with hollow eyes and issues a cold command: "Come at me." Realizing they have no choice, the lead partner decides to trust Gene's legendary evasion skills. They charge simultaneously, thrusting the blades toward Gene's vital organs. Gene slips between the flashing weapons like water, his body bending at impossible angles. Standing over the fallen men, he complains that the exercise is completely useless because they lack true, murderous intent. The narrative cuts back to the interview. John calls boxing the ultimate pursuit of physical beauty. To him, the championship belt isn't a trophy. It is a mathematical confirmation that he is the closest being to absolute perfection. Rain pours down heavily over the neon-lit city streets. 2 police officers sit in their cruiser, discussing a terrifying new rumor circulating through the local underworld. A lone phantom has been systematically dismantling entire gangs with bare hands. The scene reveals Jean-Pierre standing amidst a pile of groaning bodies, his face hidden beneath a dark hood. The officer jokes that it might be a vigilante superhero trying to clean up the streets, but Gene's cold, dead eyes confirm his motives have absolutely nothing to do with justice. Thunder crashes over his gothic mansion. He drags a thick brush soaked in fresh blood across a massive canvas. Lightning flashes, illuminating the grotesque masterpiece taking shape in his private studio. Back at the Lions Club, Gene's shadowboxing has reached a terrifying new velocity. He moves with a desperate, frantic urgency, treating the empty air like a lethal threat. He is visualizing the anomaly. He is fighting Yu in his mind, desperately trying to calculate the impossible equations of his movement. The manager watches in sheer disbelief, unable to process the sudden explosive evolution in his fighter's technique. A horrifying realization dawns on him. He knows exactly what the champion did. John flashes a twisted, manic smile, declaring he is in the best physical condition of his entire life. The manager issues a final, desperate warning. He tells John not to get in too deep, to pull back before he gets himself killed. But the champion is already gone, swallowed by his obsession. He enters a narrow, claustrophobic alleyway, the perfect environment for a close-quarters massacre. A thug leans against the chain-link fence, completely unaware of the approaching predator. The trap closes. John is completely surrounded by armed, violent criminals with nowhere to run. The gang leader sneers, recognizing the hooded figure from the terrifying street rumors. Gene's hyperfocus instantly maps the battlefield. He identifies a concealed pistol 3 yards dead ahead, 2 more targets on his left, carrying knives. A final knife wielder positioned at his 5 o'clock blind spot. He looks at the surrounding filth and coldly declares that they are not beautiful. The leader scoffs and reaches for his waistband, pulling the firearm to end the confrontation immediately. He never even clears the holster. John bridges the gap in 0.4 seconds and lands a blinding jab. He calculates the exact human reaction time, exploiting the biological delay between sight and muscle movement. Before the first body hits the ground, he pivots and buries his fist into the second attacker's solar plexus. He ducks under a wild knife slash and delivers a clean, devastating uppercut to the jaw. 3 threats neutralized in less than 2 seconds. He immediately shifts his stance, utilizing his ambidextrous footwork to redirect his momentum. Using the rotational force of his entire body, he unleashes a full swing that puts the final knife wielder to sleep. Only one man remains. The gang leader has recovered his footing and raised his weapon. John stares down the barrel of a loaded pistol. It is the absolute worst-case scenario. A lethal threat from a distance where physical combat is irrelevant. Time physically stretches. His heart hammers against his ribs, flooding his brain with adrenaline. Genuine, unfiltered terror rips through his nervous system. If he miscalculates by a millimeter, he dies. He watches the thug's finger tighten around the trigger, reading the micro movements of the tendons. The thug's eyes widen as his target simply vanishes from his line of sight. The gunshot rings out, tearing through empty air as Gene sweeps the shooter's legs with a brutal, low-angle kick. He looks at his trembling hands, a massive, twisted smile breaking across his pale face. He survived. He clenches his fist, realizing he has finally pushed his body to the exact same elevated dimension that Yu inhabits. Returning to his mansion, he violently attacks the canvas with his blood-soaked brush. He screams into the empty room, absolutely ecstatic, and he has finally found the perfection he spent his entire life agonizing over. Looking at the horrific, crimson monster painted on the canvas, he declares he is finally ready to meet his challenger. The next morning, the manager greets him at the gym. Surprised by his early arrival, John's face is shrouded in shadows, his voice trembling as he whispers that he must preserve this euphoric feeling at all costs. The manager immediately orders the staff to clear a heavy bag for him, wondering what happened overnight. Gene steps up to the reinforced leather bag, winding up his right arm. The fist flies forward with blinding, unreadable velocity. In a brief flash, we see Yu, the catalyst for this entire psychotic evolution. A brief monologue echoes in Gene's mind. He reflects on the fundamental tragedy of human existence. We are all deeply imperfect beings, but he refuses to accept that reality. He yearns to overcome every biological flaw and forge himself into a god. The reinforced leather detonates, spilling a tidal wave of sand across the pristine gym floor. He has done it. The title card officially announces the lightweight title match. Gene stands tall, whispering his eternal mantra, "I seek perfection." Across town, Stella is having an absolute meltdown, screaming into her drink that her husband is a massive idiot. She slumps over the bar, thoroughly exhausting the poor bartender forced to listen to her marital drama. He stares at her in sheer confusion, noting that she has been drinking non-alcoholic cocktails this entire time. Stella snaps her head up, tears streaming down her face, and loudly accuses him of finding her annoying too. She buries her face in her arms, wailing about the foolishness of men who prefer bloody sports over beautiful women. She genuinely cannot comprehend why John ignores her cuteness in favor of boxing. The narrative violently cuts back to the Lions Boxing Club. Yu's running shoes hammer against the treadmill belt at maximum speed. He pushes the pace, his legs blurring into a continuous cycle of motion. Stella watches him from the hallway, noting that his training intensity has skyrocketed as the title match draws near. Coach K barks orders, demanding he run the lateral evasion drills faster and sharper. He hammers the philosophy into Yu's head. A boxer needs a body capable of executing any movement in any conceivable situation. He warns Yu not to overthink or imitate orthodox styles. He just needs to rely on his monstrous innate instincts. Stella assumes Coach K wouldn't have pushed him this hard if he didn't firmly believe a victory was guaranteed. She knows the old coach lives entirely for the pursuit of power and global dominance, but as she watches Yu blindly obey the brutal commands, she realizes she has absolutely no idea what drives the boy. He stares blankly at the ceiling, utterly exhausted, lacking the fiery ambition of a typical contender. After training, Stella catches Yu in the lobby as he prepares to leave for the day. Unable to contain her curiosity, she asks him a deeply personal question. Why did he choose to step into the ring? He admits that the reason is difficult to articulate. He quietly explains that in the middle of senseless violence, he thought he saw a light shining in the dark. Looking up at the night sky, his dark eyes reflect the distant city lights. He confesses that he still isn't sure if that light was real or just an illusion. Having said his piece, he bids her farewell and walks out into the cool night air. Stella watches him leave, deeply surprised by the hidden emotional depth of the silent monster. She smiles softly, realizing she misjudged him entirely. He isn't a robot after all. She reflects on the myriad of reasons fighters choose to subject themselves to the meat grinder. For some, it's the glory. For others, a briefcase full of cash. And for a select few, it is a desperate search for their own identity. The promotional graphic flashes across the screen. The two undisputed peaks of the lightweight division are finally colliding. The press swarms the stage as Jean-Pierre and Yu step forward for the traditional pre-match stare down. John stares down at the dead-eyed rookie, practically vibrating with anticipation to test his newly forged forged perfection. The manager looks at John, confirming his absolute resolve before they leave for the arena. John nods firmly. He declares that a life lived without pursuing an ideal is a life entirely wasted. He is willing to die in the ring tonight. The day of reckoning finally arrives. He stands in front of his bathroom mirror, going through his morning routine with robotic precision. He can feel the individual plastic bristles of his toothbrush scraping across the enamel of his teeth. Sliding his tailored jacket over his shoulders, he feels every single thread of cotton brushing against his skin. With every step, he vividly processes the complex chain of muscle contractions firing from his Achilles heel up through his thighs. His perception of reality has fundamentally shifted. Time moves slower, edges are sharper, and the world is painfully clear. A wicked smile cuts across his pale face. He finally understands the terrifying dimension that Yu inhabits natively. He stares into the mirror, looking like a man who has successfully engineered his own divinity. The broadcast goes live to millions of viewers. The commentators scream their introductions over the deafening roar of the crowd. Jean-Pierre Manuel leans against the ropes, soaking in the energy. The unrivaled king of a decade. Standing opposite him is the anomaly, the silent reaper who shattered the professional rankings in less than a year. Coach K points a weathered finger at the championship belt, locking eyes with his prodigy. He promises Yu that the hardware is practically already strapped around his waist. He lays out the grand vision: total unification. Every belt, every division, total global dominance. K slaps the turnbuckle and screams his final command: go out there and take the world. Across the ring, the manager looks at his masterpiece. He firmly believes John's recent psychotic evolution has closed the gap. He tells Jean to step forward and fulfill his beautiful, violent ideal. The referee pulls the two monsters to the center of the canvas, laying down the ground rules for the slaughter. They lock eyes. The unstoppable force meets the immovable object. The commentator hypes the tension, so reminding the world that the entire sport is holding its collective breath. The bell rings. The talking is over. Jean-Pierre instantly launches a blindingly fast jab. The sheer velocity of the opening strike creates a visible shockwave in the air. He unleashes a rapid-fire sequence of massive, long-range blows, looking to establish his terrifying 79-inch kill zone immediately. The commentators lose their minds over the aggressive opening strategy. The champion isn't feeling out the rookie. He is going for the throat. Yu slips backward, dodging the lethal strikes by a fraction of a millimeter. Coach K grins from the corner, thoroughly impressed by Jean's opening gambit. He silently praises the champion's preparation, acknowledging him as a worthy sacrifice. A twisted smile forms on John's lips. This is going to be infinitely more entertaining than he calculated. A sudden flashback interrupts the violence. 16 years ago, long before the championship belts and bloody canvas, a loose basketball rebounds off the rim. The young boy leaps into the air to secure the possession. He looks down at the court, his eyes wide with a terrifying realization. For the very first time in his life, he experiences a state of absolute mechanical perfection, hanging suspended in the air as if gravity simply ceased to exist. That specific sensation of total physical dominance is exactly what he has spent his entire life trying to recreate. The creator of the perfect jump spent his entire life chasing a ghost. Every movement flowed with such unnatural ease, it felt as though someone else had temporarily taken control of his body. He tried to replicate the miracle countless times, but never tasted true flight again. Ask any elite baseball player at the absolute height of their prime. They will whisper about the rare moment they could clearly see every individual red stitch on a blindingly fast pitch. It is the holy grail of human athletics, the legendary zone. A soccer player closes his eyes, trying to find that exact mental frequency before a critical free kick. He strikes the ball with everything he has. He watches it sail through the air. A tennis player winds up for a massive serve. The racket connects with explosive kinetic energy. For standing completely still in the center of the ring, Jean-Pierre Manuel stares into the void. He calculates the angle of his opponent's foot, the tightening of the calf, and the exact tension resting in the waist. He knows the incoming trajectory before the attack even launches. Yu explodes forward, his fist blurring into a dark streak of pure violence. The champion slips it seamlessly, countering with a sharp, blinding hook. The commentators scream over the broadcast, losing their minds over the sheer speed of the exchange. They praise the reigning king for showing the arrogant rookie that there are levels to this sport. Coach K watches from the corner with a massive, wicked grin spread across his scarred face. John's internal monologue reveals a creeping dread. He originally believed the silent kid was just a remarkable genius. For soldiers who have spent years surviving the meat grinder often experience that exact moment. A veteran remembers kicking down a door in hostile territory. A mirror shatters as a sniper locks onto their position. Adrenaline floods his nervous system as he steps into the firing line. In the thick of unrelenting life or death tension, the enemy pulls the trigger. The bullet cuts through the air, but his heart pounds a slow, deliberate rhythm. To the soldier, the projectile moves like a snail suspended in honey. It feels as if time itself has completely stopped. Coach K smiles at the blood-soaked canvas. Humans are born with limited potential, but when they pierce the absolute ceiling of their cognitive ability, they can occasionally step into that frozen time. K explains the horrifying truth about about his masterpiece. Yu doesn't just have transcendental dodging skills. That is a massive misconception. What that terrifying cognitive speed actually grants him is absolute, perfect command over his own anatomy. Tens of thousands of muscle fibers, all contracting and relaxing at precisely the perfect microsecond without a single drop of wasted kinetic energy. This is the true nature of his power, the unrestricted perfection of biomechanical technique. The referee steps back as the two anomalies stare each other down. John issues a silent challenge. He demands Yu prove his worth. If a boxer is a god, they cannot demonstrate their divinity against a weak mortal. John wants to be the canvas upon which Yu paints his ultimate masterpiece. The clash resumes. They trade phantom blows that entirely bypass human perception. Yu swings wide, eyes actively testing the champion's terrifying reaction speed. The air around them practically ignites as they exchange a flurry of lethal combinations. The crowd is paralyzed. They can't even see the gloves connecting. The tension in the stadium is so thick it threatens to suffocate the front rows. John maintains his impenetrable guard, actively controlling the distance with his absurd 79-inch reach. A brief flashback reveals Coach K's final instructions before the walkout. He explicitly forbids him from imitating the champion's techniques. The old coach demands his prodigy think for himself, listen to his own body, and build his own geometry of violence. The commentators shriek in confusion as Yu suddenly drops his hands. He shifts his center of gravity forward, adopting a horrifyingly unprotected stance. It is the exact posture of a track and field runner preparing for a sprint. John's eyes widen. He recognizes the sheer arrogance of the maneuver, but the champion's perfectly tuned survival instincts scream a dire warning. If he goes in now, he will die. He bites down on his pride and drops into an absolute, full-body defensive shell. The shadowy figure of the monster towers over the canvas. The undisputed king of the lightweight division is lying flat on his back, staring blankly at the ceiling. The stadium erupts into deafening chaos. Nobody can process what just happened. The commentators are practically tearing off their headsets. Coach K leans against the ropes, entirely unsurprised by the slaughter. The referee drops to his knees, screaming the count directly into John's bleeding ear. But Gene's mind flashes back to a firm order he gave his manager. Even if it means dying in the ring, Peter is never allowed to throw in the towel. Driven by pure madness, the champion forces his broken body back up to a standing position. He spits a mouthful of blood onto the mat, admitting he didn't even see the punch connect. He finally accepts the bitter truth. Yu was always operating in a completely different dimension, but instead of fear, a twisted, euphoric smile breaks across Gene's mangled face. He wants to see more. Coach K raises an eyebrow. He recognizes the glint of absolute lunacy in the champion's eyes. The audience screams as their king refuses to surrender his 10-year reign. Yu accelerates instantly. The referee hovers anxiously, genuinely questioning if he should wave off the slaughter to save John's life. He directly asks if the champion can safely continue the bout. John glares through the crimson mask and sharply demands they get on with it. The referee gives a stern warning. He will pull the plug the second John looks defenseless. John ignores the lecture, his hyper-focus entirely locked onto the shadow standing across from him. He violently chops his hand down, resuming the bloodbath. Yu effortlessly slides back into that terrifying, unbalanced crouch. John forces every single nerve ending in his body to hyper-awaken. He analyzes the extreme center of gravity, noting how Yu balances all that lethal potential on a single toe. The muscle fibers in Yu's calves wind up so tightly, they look ready to tear completely through the skin. John's pupils constrict, zeroing in on the exact microsecond of the launch. He calculates the impossible mathematics. He plans to throw a counterstrike 2 fractions of a moment faster. The champion roars in his mind, demanding to see the absolute peak of violence. The canvas practically cracks as Yu fires himself forward like a railgun slug. The sheer kinetic force of the blow tears violently through the air. Yu seamlessly uses his toe muscles to accelerate again, closing the micro distance. Gene stares into the abyss. A devastating hook connects directly with the champion's skull. He twists his jaw at the absolute last millisecond. Coach K grins. He respects the survival instinct. Yu isn't throwing single punches. He is throwing a continuous river of concussive force. John's guard buckles as the sheer weight of the assault hammers his forearms. A stray uppercut sneaks through the shell, snapping Gene's head back. The champion was never a brawler. His entire style is built around outboxing and avoiding heavy damage, but his psychotic obsession with perfection forces his legs to remain standing. He is burning his own life force as collateral just to witness the monster move. Peter watches in sheer horror. There is nothing beautiful about this butchery. The longer the flurry lasts, the faster and heavier the strikes become. Yu's terrifying biomechanical control means he loses zero kinetic energy between swings. To Jean, it is the most magnificent thing he has ever witnessed. A machine devoid of fear or hesitation. All that exists in Yu's mind is technique functioning as a means to an end. John's eyes roll back as his consciousness finally unplugs. The commentators scream themselves hoarse. The undefeated king has gone down twice in the opening round. John lies on the mat, his blood pooling on the pristine white logo. A flashback plunges into the champion's mind. What does it actually mean to be human? He grew up in a mansion filled with broken promises and endless, pathetic screaming matches. A mother solely faithful to her own selfish desires, and a father too incompetent to stop her. John despised them both. He saw his own birth as nothing more than the biological mistake of two fools. John grips the bottom rope, his knuckles white. Panting heavily, his blood stains the canvas. He sought a being that transcends humanity to prove that perfection could exist. The flashback returns. His father just sat on the expensive sofa, weeping into his hands. John felt nothing but cold pity for the man. His father was a man who panicked easily and constantly made the wrong choices. The boy reached for the shattered family portrait. His blue eyes were devoid of any childish warmth. He studied the broken glass. He casually dropped the broken frame into the trash. He refused to end up like the pathetic man weeping in the living room. He promised himself he would always remain competent. The commentators announced that June has somehow beaten the count again. The crowd cheers for the legendary fighting spirit on display. Stella, Jean's neglected wife, covers her mouth in horror from the front row. Jean leans forward, his body practically screaming for rest. Yu waits patiently in the neutral corner, an emotionless reaper. Coach K smirks. The match is already over. The champion is just a standing corpse. The bell rings. They are brutally interrupting the slaughter and signaling the end of the first round. The commentators concede one terrifying fact. Jean is the only boxer who has ever survived a full round against Yu. In the corner, Jean aggressively spits blood into a towel, his breathing ragged and shallow. Peter stares at the horrific damage. He never imagined Jean taking a beating like this. This is no longer about defending a title. He could genuinely be killed in there. He leans over the ropes, his mustache trembling as he begs his friend to surrender. But Jean looks back with hollow eyes. You are born, and then you die. That is all there is. To Jean, the only valid meaning a person can create is choosing to die in the active pursuit of a goal. He glares at his manager, threatening never to forgive him if he throws the towel. The referee calls seconds out. Peter steps down with a heavy, breaking heart. The bell rings for the second round. Stella bursts into tears, unable to watch the man she loves willingly walk into a meat grinder. Another flashback pulls John back to a crowded plaza from his childhood. He vowed to remain calm. The apple falls far from the tree. His father stopped walking. John waited for the inevitable excuse. The man looked down at him. John didn't cry. He just noted that his father was clumsy even when committing abandonment. He calmly accepted the money, telling him to hurry back. He stood completely still as the crowd swallowed the man who was supposed to protect him. He refused to be paralyzed by the abandonment. He replaced the grief with a cold, absolute pursuit of perfection. Standing in the ring, he looks at Yu and sees the living embodiment of his life's pursuit. He roars, charging forward into the meat grinder for the final time. He demands the monster show him what meaning there was to his entire existence. Peter grips the ropes, tears threatening to spill, as he watches Jean prepare to die. Yu lunges forward, blurring out of existence entirely. The sheer destructive power of the swing parts the air like a localized hurricane. Jean plants his feet, throwing a desperate, full-body counter right into the teeth of the storm. But internally, his madness finally breaks. He apologizes to Stella. He realizes he cannot make his unborn daughter a widow just to satisfy his own twisted ego. Stella watches, utterly paralyzed by fear. John remembers finding a lost crying girl in the street years ago. Stella feels the agonizing premonition that he is about to leave her side forever. Her eyes fill with tears. A hand suddenly clenches tightly around a white towel. The stadium lights blaze down on the bloody canvas. Stella fights the security guards, sobbing hysterically as they hold her back from the apron. She begs him not to leave her behind. The memory of his father's retreating back flashes in his mind. To be completely honest, that was exactly what young Jean wanted to scream that day too. Don't go. Don't abandon me. Stella screams the ultimate truth over the roar of the crowd. She is pregnant. The revelation hits John like a physical blow. The ghostly shadow of Yu fades from his mind, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. What has he been doing? He looks at the tears streaming down his wife's face, and the little boy left in the plaza finally allows himself to cry too. Stella stares in shock. A younger Jean held her hand, gently guiding her home. He looks at the beautiful family he built, realizing he was just as clumsy as his father. The commentator suddenly cuts through the noise, announcing a massive interruption. The bell rings frantically. The fight is officially over. The referee steps aggressively between the two fighters, ordering them to move. John spits a mouthful of blood and tells Yu that the belt belongs to the one who is qualified. The crowd murmurs in confusion, wondering if the champion is running away like Sasim. Peter stands outside the ropes, his mustache mustache trembling as tears stream down his face. He threw it. Stella falls to her knees in sheer relief. Her husband is going to live. Yu lowers his hands, his expression as blank and indifferent as it was before the opening bell. Jean formally surrenders his throne. Yu accepts the victory without a single trace of emotion. Coach K furiously slams his fist against the apron. He is livid. He wanted a corpse, not a surrender. The commentators announce the official handover of the belt. The Golden Championship belt is formally presented to the Silent Monster. A new legend has officially been crowned in the boxing world. The reign of Jean-Pierre Manuel ends at 2 rounds and 11 seconds. Enter the era of Yu. Deep in the bowels of the arena, Jean sits quietly in the locker room, his eyes heavily bandaged. Peter advises him to forget about boxing and focus entirely on recovery. Jean softly asks his manager if he will make a good father. Peter smiles warmly and assures him he will. Stella slowly opens the door, her eyes red and puffy from the emotional roller coaster. She runs to him, wrapping her arms around the broken champion, completely ignoring the blood on his skin. But Yu just stares out into the dark, entirely unfazed by the glory. Jay sits in the rundown gym, his eyes glued to the screen. He knows Yu's speed, technique, and athletic ability are beyond normal human limits. The coach barks at Jay, telling him to prepare for the toughest competitor of his short career. Meanwhile, the thugs from the Sumi gang kick a door open, screaming for Ryu. The butcher, the terrifying number 2 man of the Sumi gang, stands holding a massive meat cleaver, but he is completely confused. Ryu blurts a death threat before he even finishes his sentence. The goons arrive, eyes staring in awe at the hallway littered with unconscious bodies. They realize Ryu took care of the entire gang by himself. Ryu stands cleanly amidst the bodies, wearing a tailored white suit and looking profoundly bored. Before the butcher can even swing the blade, Ryu shatters his jaw with a casual, devastating high kick. He follows up with a brutal combination, absolutely dismantling the gangster. Jay watches the official handover ceremony on the television. He is officially the world champion. But Jay notices the dark, empty void in the new champion's eyes. He wonders why Yu doesn't look happy, not even slightly. He asks the television a quiet question. Why did you become a boxer? The other amateur boxers in the gym are practically vibrating with excitement. The coach mutters that it's no wonder Ryu was completely devastated by his loss. He reminds the boy that his training period was long, and he shouldn't worry about falling behind his prodigy friend. The tattooed giant notes that Jay's innocent face doesn't fit the image of a boxer at all. A brief vision of a young, fierce boxer flashes across the screen. The coach silently recalls the incredibly hard time that boxer gave him back in the day, betting Jay won't be an easy match either. The coach orders Jay to stop watching Yu's matches immediately. He explains that Yu's boxing style is in a completely different dimension. Copying it is a pipe dream. He advises the boy to start watching tapes of Yuto Takeda instead, even if Jay is currently just a flickering candle flame compared to the champion's roaring inferno. He tells Jay that he reminds him of a certain boxer from his past. Jay asks who he means. The coach remembers a man respected by their entire generation. He was like the sun, but the coach waves it off, telling him to just focus on studying Takeda. The training steps up to the next brutal level. The narrator notes that there are millions of different stories unfolding in the world simultaneously. Stories of hope, where protagonists overcome adversity, or tragedies, where they fall into a downward spiral, or even stories where the protagonist turns out to be the final boss that others must defeat. But rarely, very rarely, a blonde man turns off the television, telling the kids at the orphanage to eat their food. There are stories where it's not until the absolute last moment. The blonde man stares out the window, eyes a quiet fire burning in his golden eyes. The scene shifts back to Jay's grueling training session. The blonde man from the orphanage smiles, promising to return to his own story a bit later. Jay sprints through the local park, shouting into the wind that he is going pro. His feet pound against the dirt track. He is finally going to become a real boxer. Enter Coach Typhoon Kim, the 42-year-old owner of Jay's rundown boxing gym. He stares out the window, deep in melancholy. Years ago, he stumbled upon a massive, unpolished diamond named Ryu Baeksan. Knowing his small gym couldn't properly cut it, he unselfishly handed the prodigy over to a master jeweler. But fate had a completely different, deeply annoying plan in mind. A rough diamond the size of a boulder suddenly appeared and completely crushed the gemstone he had discovered. Ryu subsequently quit the sport, making Coach Kim's grand sacrifice feel entirely pointless. He sighs heavily, wondering what the hell Ryu is even doing with his life right now. His brooding is interrupted by a cheerful voice at the door. Jay walks in with a massive smile, completely ready to train. Coach Kim screams at him to push harder, run faster. If he wants to survive in the pro world, he has to keep running until his legs give out. The tattooed giant, Steel, walks in and laughs at the scrawny new recruit hitting the bag. Kim admits he originally didn't want Jay to box, hoping he'd live an easier life. But the kid is dead serious. Steel scoffs, noting that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Steel asks why Kim dragged him out here. Kim casually replies that Steel is the greatest boxer he knows. A flashback shows them brawling in the ring. Steel had a better career, but Kim held the head-to-head record at 3-2. too. Steel was a reckless, aggressive bulldozer who punched through everything. Kim sighs. The kid's physical weakness isn't even his biggest problem. It's his eyesight. An accident during childhood left Jay almost completely blind in one eye. Because of that, he has a terribly hard time gauging distance. So Coach Kim resorts to the most grueling training regimen available. Jay drags heavy tires across the dirt track, screaming his affirmations. Kim orders him to build his neck and back, then his abs. Kim knows Steel's aggressive style perfectly because he experienced it firsthand. He screams at Jay to abandon any hope of using reach as a weapon. If he can't judge distance, he has to permanently attach himself to his opponent's chest. He has to take the hits, force his way inside, and become an infighting turtle. The strategy requires a chin made of iron. Since Jay lacks knockout power, he has to survive in the danger zone where uppercuts end careers. Kim brutally reminds him that he must stick close to level the playing field. Jay throws a wild hook. Kim screams that at point-blank range, it doesn't matter if he's blind. If the opponent hits him twice, Jay must hit him 4 times. Pure attrition. Jay practices his explosive footwork. He hardens his body into steel to gain the upper hand in a close-quarters brawl. Kim drills the mantra into his head. Slow and steady wins the race. He forbids Jay from debuting early. He is starting with a massive disadvantage and needs every duck in a row. Kim uses a restaurant analogy to make his point. He screams at Jay to simplify his menu. Choose and focus on 1 or 2 dishes. Some boxers dabble in multiple styles to look pretty. Jay just needs to show the world how terrifying an infighting turtle can truly be. Kim watches the boy drag the tires, feeling somewhat responsible for dragging him into this brutal world. He closes his eyes, thinking of the boy's father. He tells Jay that other boxers might be rare, fragile gemstones. But Jay is a tree. A tree may be considered less valuable on the market, but a gemstone's value is decided at birth, and once a diamond breaks, it can never be recovered. A tree is entirely different. Even when violently chopped down, it will stubbornly grow back, thicker and far stronger than before. Time is given equally to everyone. Some achieve greatness instantly, some spend it in vain, chasing the wind, and some thoughtfully make every moment count, waiting for their time to come. Time continues to pass. Months of grueling, repetitive labor. Finally, Coach Kim announces that Jay's debut opponent has been officially decided. Kim rubs the back of his neck, looking incredibly stressed. His first opponent is way too strong. Enter Rock Kang, a terrifying 40-bout veteran with a reputation for crushing rookies. Rock is the fully evolved masterclass version of the exact style Jay is trying to learn. In other words, he's the absolute best version of Jay. Jay swallows hard, processing the impossible mountain he has to climb. Kim explains that all the lower-ranked boxers dropped out, leaving Jay paired with the veteran by default. Steel bluntly states that Jay is definitely going to lose, but to prepare him for the nightmare, Coach Kim calls in the favor from Steel. A national champion infighter is the perfect sparring partner for the Rock strategy. Steel slips on the gloves, promising to go easy on the kid. He flashes a wicked grin. Jay raises his guard, trembling slightly against the towering giant. The bell rings for the sparring session. Kim barks instructions from outside the ropes. In a match between infighters, they trade hooks shoulder to shoulder. The one with less raw strength and spirit inevitably loses. He orders Jay to plant his sturdy legs and torso to stand his ground. But against Rock's thick neck and torso, raw strength is a losing bet. Jay's physique is actually better suited for an outboxer. So, when pitted against a physically superior opponent in the pocket, what is the strategy? Steel closes in, noting that Jay has put on some decent weight. He throws a probing jab. Jay hops laterally. Kim screams the answer, sidestep and speed. When the bodies are close and the pressure is on, a quick lateral step destroys the opponent's balance. He orders Jay to crouch and use his footwork to escape the visual field, attacking from the blind side. Steel catches Jay cleanly before the boy can complete the pivot. Too slow, Kim watches with a heavy heart. Unless you're a born genius, the gap between a 40-bout veteran and a debut rookie is a massive chasm. A veteran has the upper hand in psychology, trickery, and muscle memory, but rookies possess exactly one unique advantage, and Jay is going to have to figure out what it is if he wants to survive his debut. Jay stares at the glowing television screen, watching his upcoming nightmare unfold in high definition. The footage offers absolutely nothing on Jay himself. He is a ghost in the professional circuit, but Rock Kang leaves behind a massive trail of violence. His fighting history is entirely public record. Coach Kim leans in, dissecting the veteran's rigid geometry. The man operates on pure, predictable brutality. While the veteran favors hooks in the early rounds, his true obsession lies in the straight punch. The strategy is simple in theory. Lure the straight, slip the punch, and dig a massive hook directly into the liver. Coach Kim demonstrates the motion, driving the pad into Jay's ribs to make him feel the exact angle. Jay absorbs the lesson, his eyes burning with desperate determination. The training kicks into overdrive. So he drags his exhausted body through the dirt, pushing the physical limits of his frail frame. Coach Kim barks orders, demanding absolute perfection from every single pivot and weight transfer. Steel absorbs the vicious body blows during sparring, acting as the perfect stand-in for The Rock. Rock. Physical exhaustion is nothing compared to the psychological weight pressing down on him. The night before the debut finally arrives, Jay stares at himself in the mirror, looking at a body that has completely transformed. He lies in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the deafening rhythm of his own heart. Unable to quiet his mind, he escapes the suffocating darkness of his bedroom. He begins to shadowbox under the moonlight, treating the empty space as his impending opponent. Coach Kim steps onto the roof, eye quietly observing his student's relentless dedication. The older man offers a warm, knowing smile. The pre-debut insomnia is a universal rite of passage. Jay lowers his hands, openly confessing his terrifying fear of failure. He is terrified of stepping under the lights only to be completely erased from the sport in a single night. Coach Kim looks out over the city skyline. For a professional, winning and losing dictate survival itself, but the veteran coach believes a boxer's true worth extends far beyond a simple record on a spreadsheet. There is an intrinsic value to stepping into the ring and giving everything you have to the canvas. Kim promises the boy that if he can find that meaning, his life as a fighter will never be wasted. Jay clenches his fist, shifting his focus entirely to the violent reality waiting for him tomorrow. The day of the match arrives. Jay sits in the sterile locker room, his leg bouncing nervously. Steele attempts to offer some rugged comfort, claiming he was utterly fearless during his own debut. Coach Kim ruthlessly shatters the lie, loudly revealing that Steele practically lived in the bathroom from sheer terror. The mental image of the tattooed giant trembling on a toilet shatters the tension in the room. Steele screams in embarrassment, demanding the coach shut his mouth. Jay walks down the dark, claustrophobic concrete tunnel leading to the arena floor. Coach Kim pats his back. It is time. The canvas feels firm beneath his laced boots, the point of no return. He steps through the ropes and into the blinding center of the world. Across the ring stands the executioner. Rock Kang is a mountain of scarred muscle, on his back radiating a deeply oppressive aura. Coach Kim grips Jay's shoulders, demanding he push the fear aside. He reiterates the opening gambit: pretend to be an outboxer and manipulate the veteran's expectations. Jay nods, cementing the game plan into his nervous system. Jay's chest tightens. The physical presence of the man is entirely different from the videotapes. They touch gloves. The veteran looks down at the frail rookie with absolute indifference. The bell screams. The match doesn't even have time to breathe before Jay is sent crashing onto the canvas. Coach Kim winces from the corner. The veteran bypassed the feeling out process entirely. Rock Kang understands the psychology of a terrified debutante. Break their spirit immediately. The referee begins the harsh, echoing count, but the violent impact doesn't break Jay. Instead, it flips a deeply familiar switch in his brain. Having spent years as a human punching bag, pain is an old friend. Sei. He pushes himself off the mat at the count of 6, entirely clear-headed. Coach Kim exhales a breath he didn't know he was holding. The boy's mind is intact. Rock Kang narrows his eyes. Most rookies stay down after a shot like that. The veteran notes that Jay instinctively tucked his chin before impact, drastically reducing the concussive force. He realizes this skinny kid has taken heavy fire before. Rock Kang lunges forward, cutting off the escape routes with terrifying speed. He promises to use full power. Jay weaves under a massive hook, sticking firmly to the outboxing illusion. Jay counters, slapping a quick jab against the veteran's defense. Rock smirks, assuming the kid is just a slippery coward trying to survive the round. He vows to trap the eel and crush him against the ropes. Jay's footwork blurs, actively maintaining the precise distance required to bait the veteran. The heavy boots of the veteran stomp forward, treating outboxing as an insult to the sport. Rock abandons pretense and throws a reckless, bulldozing swing. Jay dips beneath the arc, the leather glove missing his hair by a fraction of an inch. He immediately exploits the opening, driving a sharp retaliatory jab directly into the veteran's jaw. The crowd gasps as the rookie lands his first clean hit of the night. Coach Kim smiles. The plan is working flawlessly. Jay resets his stance, breathing heavily but gaining confidence in his own muscle memory. The referee counts, but the dynamic has shifted. Rock Kang glares at the boy, realizing he walked straight into a calculated ambush. Coach Kim crosses his arms, silently celebrating the successful deception. The veteran wipes his mouth. The kid isn't a slippery coward after all. He drops his hips, adopting a grounded, lethal posture. They collide in the center of the ring, abandoning footwork entirely for a brutal, close-quarters war. The mental battle evaporates. This is pure physical attrition. Jay absorbs a glancing blow, tracking the micro-movements of the veteran's colossal shoulders. He fires a counter combination, forcing Rock Kang to swallow a mouthful of leather. He slips a devastating cross, his grueling evasion training paying massive dividends. Rock answers with a concussive body shot that rattles Jay's ribcage. The veteran grimaces, recognizing that Jay's raw talent is absolutely nothing special, but there is something incredibly dangerous burning behind the rookie's green eyes. Jay absorbs a hook to the temple and simply refuses to stagger backward. Rock Kang remembers the old tree analogy. Some fighters are born diamonds, others just refuse to break. He realizes this kid possesses the durable, thick roots of an old tree. Rock unleashes a furious combination, determined determined to chop the tree down by force. Jay hides behind his high guard, weathering the storm as the heavy impacts echo through the arena. The sheer power behind the veteran's punches threatens to break Jay's forearms. Realizing he cannot win a stationary war of attrition, Jay relies entirely on his speed. He pivots on a dime and lands a blistering 1-2 directly on the Rock's nose. But Coach Kim pumps his fist. The boy is actively dismantling a 40-bout veteran. Rock grunts, his eyes narrowing in frustration. Jay ducks under a wild retaliatory swing, commanding the geometry of the exchange. He buries a punishing right hook into the veteran's exposed ribs. The accumulated damage finally begins to slow the veteran's aggressive advance. Jay capitalizes on the hesitation, launching an upward strike that snaps the veteran's head back. The Rock stumbles, his vision blurring from the relentless assault. Steele watches from the corner, genuinely impressed by the kid's transformation. Coach Kim screams for Jay to push the advantage and utilize his superior velocity. Jay practically dances around the massive target, his hands a blur of green leather. Rock desperately throws haymakers at empty air, swinging entirely out of frustration. Jay parries effortlessly and lands another clean cross, rattling the veteran's jaw. The veteran grits his teeth. The kid is genuinely strong. Jay has firmly taken the lead, dictating the flow of the match with precision, striking. Coach Kim never believed the boy could execute the strategy this perfectly under live pressure. Jay steps into the pocket, throwing another vicious combination. He drowns the veteran in sheer volume. Steele's eyes widen. He has never seen a rookie perform like this. Kim orders Jay to lock the round down and avoid unnecessary risks before the bell. The veteran glares across the canvas. It has been a long time since a rookie forced him to take the sport this seriously. He recognizes that someone highly skilled must have trained this kid to survive the pocket. Jay pants heavily, the adrenaline masking the rapidly accumulating fatigue in his muscles. Coach Kim looks deeply concerned. The physical toll on Jay is obvious. Round 2 begins with an immediate shift in the atmosphere. Jay throws a hook, assuming his momentum will carry over seamlessly. He lands the blow, hearing the satisfying thud of leather against muscle. He follows up with a rapid flurry, pushing the veteran toward the ropes. Internally, Jay is ecstatic. His combinations are piercing the guard cleanly. The scoreboard confirms his advantage. He assumes Rock has switched to a defensive shell. He actually believes he can win this. He throws another massive swing, pouring his remaining energy into the assault, but his legs tremble. The lactic acid burns fiercely through his calves. Coach Kim notices the terrifying reality behind the exchange. The strategy is failing. Jay isn't dominating the match at all. Rock Kang is simply letting the rookie exhaust himself against an impenetrable defense. Kim realizes the veteran intentionally absorbed the light hits to manipulate Jay's pacing. Jay stands in the center of the ring, gasping for air, unaware of the invisible trap closing around him. Rock Kang stares at the boy with hollow eyes. The real hunt has just begun. The veteran hasn't even started breathing hard. The physical cost of throwing explosive movements non-stop has finally caught up to the rookie. The true killer isn't the physical exertion. It is the immense psychological pressure. A close quarters brawl requires a fighter to remain relaxed while trading concussive blows. Every time Jay absorbs a hit, his inexperienced body instinctively tenses up. That stiffness forces his muscles to burn significantly more oxygen with every single swing. The terrifying reality of fighting without headgear has caused him to bleed out his stamina entirely. Rock Hang calculated this exact physiological response from the opening bell. Jay realizes too late that the veteran has been dictating the entire pace of the round. Coach Kim considers ordering a defensive strategy to survive until the bell, but Rock Kang is a master of hunting down cowards. Retreating is an immediate death sentence. The coach crosses his arms. He just has to believe the kid can survive the storm. Jay screams, forcing his failing body to stand its ground and continue the exchange. Coach Kim yells from the corner, desperately trying to keep his fighter mentally anchored. The bell rings, dragging them straight into round 3. The veteran glares at him, no longer playing defensive games. Rock Kang lands a devastating shot that physically lifts Jay off his feet. The sheer, unadulterated weight behind the veteran's punches returns with a vengeance. Jay realizes the veteran wasn't just stalling. He was conserving his raw power for the final slaughter. Unable to compete in pure strength, Jay throws desperate combinations, hoping to stall the bulldozer. Coach Kim curses. The boy's velocity has dropped completely off a cliff. Rock Kang traps him against the turnbuckle, eliminating any remaining avenue of escape. Jay's boots feel like cement. His legs refuse to respond to his brain. Rock winds up and delivers a gargantuan body shot that completely shatters the rookie's posture. He follows immediately with a brutal right cross directly to the head. The veteran is actively searching for the exact angle to end the match permanently. Jay is practically blinded by the pain. He can't keep absorbing this level of sheer trauma. A massive left hook sails toward Jay's exposed temple. The glove tears through the air, carrying enough kinetic energy to decapitate the boy. Coach Kim watches in sheer horror as Jay somehow miraculously dodges the lethal execution, but escaping the trap completely unbalances the rookie, leaving him vulnerable. Rock Kang obliterates him with a devastating point-blank combination. The sheer force of the blow threatens to break Jay's ribs entirely. Steel winces, unable to watch the brutal, one-sided execution. Jay screams in sheer agony, his body reaching the precipice of structural failure. He collapses onto the canvas, his mind swimming in a sea of static. Jay struggles to process the darkness. The veteran is simply too overwhelmingly strong. The mathematical difference in raw professional experience is an insurmountable mountain, but Jay refuses to surrender. He has one final, desperate card hidden up his sleeve. He drags himself upright at the count of 5, blood pouring freely from his nose. Rock Kang is genuinely impressed by the kid's sheer refusal to remain on the floor. The veteran decides he truly likes this stubborn, unbreakable rookie. He decides to honor the boy's resolve by revealing his ultimate technique. Jay pants heavily, his green eyes completely dilated with adrenaline and desperation. They clash again in the center of the ring, trading heavy, exhausting blows. Jay zeroes his entire focus onto the veteran's rhythm. He waits for the microsecond the opening presents itself. Duck the straight, counter with the liver shot. Rock Kang pulls his arm back, preparing to launch a heavy swing. Jay executes the pivot perfectly, but something feels horrifyingly wrong. Coach Kim's eyes widen in sheer terror. The trap has been completely reversed. Jay realizes he just walked headfirst into an execution chamber. Rock Kang instantly redirects his momentum, launching a crushing counter-offensive. A sickening impact echoes through the arena as the veteran's fist connects flush with Jay's exposed jaw. Everyone in Jay's corner is completely paralyzed by the sheer violence of the sequence. Rock turns his back, assuming the job is finished. Jay lies completely motionless, his grand strategy entirely dismantled in a single second. The count reaches 4. The darkness creeping into his peripheral vision is absolute. He stares into the void, asking himself the ultimate, crushing question. What determines a person's value? Rock Kang casually thanks the broken rookie for an entertaining fight. The veteran stands tall in the center of the ring, the undisputed master of his domain. Jay remains inverted on the canvas, completely swallowed by the bitter reality of defeat. In this brutal, binary world of winners and losers, there is no prize for trying hard. Does that mathematical reality strip all value from the boy bleeding on the floor? Jay coughs up a violent splatter of blood, his lungs burning with sheer refusal. He flashes through the memories of his life, tracing the long timeline of a coward who always ran away. But he also remembers the brief, radiant moments of genuine warmth he found along the way. The referee approaches, eyes preparing to wave off the slaughter and declare a technical knockout. Coach Kim averts his gaze. 2 knockdowns in a single round. The debut is a tragedy. The referee bends down, asking if Jay has the capacity to continue the fight. Jay screams his answer, forcing his shattered body back onto his trembling feet. The official decides to let the slaughter continue for a few more seconds, out of respect for the kid's willpower. He warns Jay that one more slip, one more sign of danger, and he will permanently stop the match. The referee signals the resumption of the round. Rock Kang glares at the stubborn fool. Obstinacy is just an invitation to permanent brain damage. They clash instantly, the veteran driving Jay violently into the ropes. Coach Kim grits his teeth. The Rock is showing absolutely zero mercy. Jay absorbs a brutal hook, his face exploding in a fresh spray of crimson. The impacts sound like a wrecking ball systematically destroying a condemned building. Jay accepts his inevitable fate. He knows he is destined to become one of those forgotten rookies. Coach Kim covers his eyes, unable to witness the final execution. But Jay didn't step into the ring to discover if he was stronger or weaker than other men. He absorbs another devastating uppercut, his consciousness threatening to unplug entirely. He plants his boots firmly into the canvas, refusing to yield an inch of ground. He throws a desperate, ragged counter, seeking the absolute definition of true strength. The veteran swats the attack aside and delivers a concussive right cross. Jay's face is a ruined mask of blood and sweat. The veteran decides he has seen enough. It is time to put the stubborn child to sleep permanently. Rock winds up his colossal shoulder, channeling every ounce of his raw power into an apocalyptic straight punch. The veteran steps into the throw, his boots hammering against the floor like a piston. He unleashes the weapon that has defined his entire career. He realizes the boy has completely spent his remaining stamina. Coach Kim watches in horror. Jay stares at the incoming projectile. His legs are entirely unresponsive. With dodging rendered a biological impossibility, Jay prepares to take the hit straight to the skull. Rock Kang internally praises the boy. He genuinely was the greatest rookie the veteran had ever encountered. Steel whispers a silent wish for luck. The massive glove tears through the empty air, carrying enough kinetic force to end a career. Jay's face erupts in blood as the blow lands with terrifying, sickening precision. The sheer concussive force practically folds Jay's spine in half. Coach Kim realizes this entire matchup defied all common sense from the very beginning. A fragile rookie should never have been placed in a cage with a bone-crushing executioner. But Kim accepted the fight because he saw an invisible, unyielding possibility hidden deep within the boy. He screams internally, begging the universe to validate his terrible gamble. Jay's consciousness flatlines completely. The pain overrides every remaining sensory input. Rock Kang narrows his eyes. The boy should be entirely entirely unconscious, but his fists are moving faster than before. The veteran is genuinely pushed backward by the impossible assault. He absorbs a staggering counter right to the jaw, on his eyes widening in sheer disbelief. Jay recognizes the trajectory of the next attack. This is the veteran's legendary trademark straight, a technique meticulously refined over an entire brutal career. No tricks, no feints, just an unstoppable locomotive of human bone heading directly for his face. The boy marvels at the sheer volume of extreme labor required to forge a weapon this utterly devastating. The veteran's fist is the physical manifestation of his blood, sweat, and absolute dedication to the sport. Rock Kong's entire life is condensed into a single, inescapable projectile, and Jay decides that his own life, every grueling lap, every drop of blood, will meet it head-on. The two men stand stripped of strategy, communicating their existences through pure violence. It no longer matters who wins or loses. The beautiful to savage conversation is enough. The second straight arrives, a massive blur of leather and ill intent. Jay commands his body to weave, but his nervous system completely rejects the order. He has crossed the absolute threshold of physical endurance. He begs his shattered frame to perform the evasion sequence just one more time. The glove sails past, missing Jay's temple by the width of a single hair. He instantly pivots, dropping his weight to fire the left body hook he spent months drilling into his bones. The memory of dragging heavy tires through the dirt flashes in his mind. The veteran's massive fist connects flush against Jay's guard instead, shattering the remains of his defense. Jay smiles through the blood. He gave everything he had to the canvas. The impact sends him spiraling violently into the darkness. He collapses, Ots accepting the brutal reality of his physical limitations. But as Jay falls backward, his left arm completes its predetermined mechanical trajectory entirely on its own. Coach Kim's jaw drops. Steele's eyes widen in sheer, unadulterated shock. Rock Kang's eyes practically bulge out of his skull. A devastating, perfectly angled left hook buries itself directly into the veteran's liver. The agonizing shockwave tears through his internal organs as the trap finally snaps shut. The referee steps in, desperately waving his arms as both fighters collapse onto the bloody canvas simultaneously. The official stares at the carnage, utterly speechless. Jay lies on his back, gasping for a breath that refuses to arrive. The bell screams its final judgment over the battlefield. A metaphorical bird crashes violently against the floor, eyes mirroring the devastation of the fight. The referee grabs his wrist and violently yanks his arm toward the ceiling, declaring him the victor by knockout. Jay stares at his own raised fist, completely failing to comprehend the reality of the situation. Steele throws his arms around the exhausted rookie, screaming in disbelief. Coach Kim smiles warmly. The miracle actually happened. His insane, desperate gamble on the frail boy paid out a monumental dividend. Jay erupts into a massive, blood-soaked grin, the realization finally washing over him. In the empty seats of the arena, a lone blonde man watches the celebration with quiet interest. Rock Kong approaches the corner, freely admitting that his absolute trump card was dismantled by a rookie. He notes that Jay's final reactionary weave and liver shot were genuinely masterful techniques. For a fleeting microsecond, the veteran witnessed a level of movement that belongs entirely on the world stage. He points a finger at the boy, aggressively warning him not to become a sore loser in the future. The veteran cracks a terrifying smile, eagerly anticipating watching Jay evolve. Jay bows deeply, screaming his gratitude to the man who nearly ended his life. The lone spectator analyzes the boy. He is still incredibly raw and unpolished, but the indomitable spirit and the sharp reaction speed all combined to produce a fighter possessing undeniable potential. He decides this skinny kid is destined to carve a massive name for himself in the sport. Steele viciously rubs Jay's head, jokingly predicting the boy will challenge the world champion in no time. But Rock Kang issues a cold, dire warning. If Jay continues climbing, he will eventually encounter the reigning king. The era of the monster currently sitting on the throne is just beginning. Later that night, Jay lies completely awake in his dark bedroom, staring blankly at the ceiling. Every time he closes his eyes, he can physically feel the heavy, oppressive aura of the veteran pressing against him. A massive, irrepressible smile breaks across his face. He is officially a professional boxer. He remembers the exact moment he managed to slip the veteran's final straight punch. The intense, grueling training sessions replay endlessly in his mind. He survived the pocket against a man who destroys rookies for a living. He rolls around on the mattress, giggling like a madman, unable to contain the overwhelming joy. But the euphoric high is violently interrupted by a chilling realization. The only reason his exhausted body managed to evade the final blow was pure, unadulterated luck. He scrambles onto the rooftop, the cool night air hitting his sweating face. He drops into a stance, desperately trying to replay the final sequence in his mind. The shadow forms in front of him. The phantom of Ryu Baeksun explodes forward with a blinding flurry. Jay forces himself to move, his eyes tracking the impossible velocity of the imaginary assault. He throws a counter, desperately trying to land a hit on the shifting, chaotic target. But the phantom effortlessly slips the blow, moving with the terrifying fluidity of a true genius. Before Jay can recover, the next attack is is already tearing through his guard. A phantom hook connects flush, rattling Jay's skull with imaginary force. He realizes against an opponent like Ryu, for dodging a single strike means absolutely nothing. The genius operates outside conventional rhythm, throwing an endless river of violence. Jay clenches his fists, knowing deep in his bones that his lucky dodge wouldn't save him against true talent. He screams into the night, forcing his exhausted body back into a fighting stance. He resumes his shadow boxing, refusing to let the terrifying vision paralyze his progress. Hours pass. The physical toll finally forces him to surrender to exhaustion. He looks down at his worn sneakers, accepting the massive gap in talent between himself and the prodigies. But before he finally turns in for the night, he decides to make one final declaration. He stares at the phantoms standing in the shadows. A shiver of genuine fear runs down his spine, but his green eyes refuse to look away. He turns around, deciding to conquer his fear instead of running from it. The phantom slides forward, initiating another relentless, high-speed assault. Jay zeroes in on the erratic movements. He ducks beneath a brutal swing, his muscles screaming in protest. He pivots sharply, mimicking the exact footwork that won him the match hours earlier. He pants heavily, the imaginary war demanding every ounce of his remaining focus. He nods firmly to himself. He accepts the challenge. The scene cuts sharply to a brightly lit office. A distinguished man with a prominent blonde mustache sips his morning coffee. The sports broadcast replays the official handover of the lightweight belt to Yu. Kei stands at the podium, surrounded by flashing cameras, loudly declaring their next objective. The manager's grin widens. Coach K is officially targeting the junior welterweight title. He notes that while K might prefer an immediate title shot, the quiet anomaly must first prove he is qualified to step into the ring with his champion. Coach K dictates the next move on his warpath. He aims straight for the current first-place contender in the junior welterweight division, Elliot von Heinberg. The strategy is arrogant but clear. Crush the top ranker, then take the champion. The Boxing Association instantly greenlights the bout. Yu enters the arena as the newly crowned lightweight king, his eyes as hollow as the day he debuted. Elliot is seething. The disrespect of treating a top-tier professional like a minor stepping stone is unforgivable. He glares at the hollow-eyed anomaly. He vows to finish Yu off first, then hunt down Coach K for the humiliation. The match begins, and the tension instantly shatters. The veteran reporter is practically trembling. Yu completely refused to throw a single punch in the first round. He just danced around the lethal strikes, treating the #1 contender like a sparring partner. The message is loud and clear. He doesn't even need to attack to maintain absolute control. Elliot retreats to his corner, his pride shattered into a million jagged pieces. He is a third-generation elite boxer, a man defined by pedigree. The sheer humiliation is burning through his disciplined exterior. His coach desperately attempts to anchor him, demanding he stay level-headed and wait for the precise opening. The bell signals the start of the second round. Yu decides the demonstration has lasted long enough. The match ends abruptly, the crowd utterly silenced by the execution. The official timestamp marks exactly 2 rounds and 11 seconds. Present-day coach Misaki watches the broadcast from her gym, her arms folded tight. Misaki analyzes the chilling reality behind the spectacle. Peter Kent notes the horrifying truth behind the display. Yu isn't fighting to win. He possesses the absolute luxury of deciding exactly when and how a match will end. Misaki stares at the screen. Von Heinberg was the strongest infighter in the division. She looks at the golden championship belt wrapped around her own fighter's waist. Far from the glowing lights of the arena, Yuto Takeda is already out on the pavement. Misaki questions if her champion actually stands a chance against a monster of that magnitude. Yuto returns to his dark apartment, drenched in sweat. He lies awake, staring into the dark. The hollow, dead eyes of the challenger burn themselves into his memory. He looks over at the framed photographs resting on his shelf, the parents who gave him his spirit. He crawls into bed, openly admitting his fear to the silent room. Peter Kent breaks the silence in the gym, stating the ugly, unspoken rule of professional sports. He despises the phrase, hard worker. In this brutal industry, calling someone a hard worker just means they lack the talent to be great. Blood, sweat, and tears are the bare minimum entry fee. Talent is what actually builds champions. Yuto obliterates the heavy bag, his form rigid and explosive. Misaki watches her student. He is the sole glaring exception to every rule Peter Kent just mentioned. A flashback pulls the clock back a decade to the day he first arrived. He didn't have a single speck of talent, not one. The gym door flies open, revealing a towering man with a booming laugh. Hiroto pushes his timid 8-year-old son forward, requesting a massive favor. Misaki reminds him that he was on the national judo team. He should teach the kid himself, but Hiroto casually pushes the responsibility onto the former gold medalist. She gives in, rubbing her temples, already exhausted by the chaotic request. Training begins with the absolute basics: stance, footing, rhythm. It is immediately disastrous. The boy possesses zero physical intuition. Natural athletes generate kinetic flow effortlessly. Yuto's body actively fights against itself. He trips over his own feet before he can even extend his arm. Misaki stares in disbelief. The kid didn't inherit a single drop of his father's athletic genetics. Looking back, it's a miracle that clumsy child became a world champion. He has his father's face, but he moves with all the fragility of his mother. Hiroto formally leaves his son in her care, ignoring her complaints about being unpaid. He mentions that Miho's condition has stabilized at the hospital. Misaki watches them leave, carrying a heavy weight in her chest. The narrative dives deeper into the past. Misaki, Hiroto, and Miho were a trio of inseparable childhood friends. Miho trips over a rock, her fragile frame betraying her. Hiroto and Misaki were built for rough play, while Miho was always delicate. Misaki watches them, harboring a quiet, unspoken affection for the loud boy. Lost in thought, Misaki trips over her own feet and crashes into the dirt. Miho gently scolds him for teasing their friend. Time marched forward, dragging them out of childhood and into the complexities of adolescence. Misaki channels her frustrations into the heavy bag at the boxing gym. Hiroto drops the news bluntly. He and Miho are officially dating. Misaki stares blankly, processing the shift in their lifelong trio. She forces a smile and offers her congratulations. She expected it, but hearing the words spoken aloud still stung. She refuses to let jealousy poison their friendship. They remain close, lighting sparklers in the dark and cherishing their mundane youth. She stood beside them on their wedding day, hiding her pain behind a genuine smile. But life has a terrifying habit of ripping away the things you hold most dear. The funeral portrait sits heavily on the altar. Hiroto is gone. The cruel hand of fate strikes twice. Miho lies trapped in a hospital bed, sustained by machines. Those who remain are forced to grow stronger to bear the weight. A flashback within a flashback reveals Hiroto's final night. He stepped in to protect someone, she taking a blade from a desperate coward. Hiroto collapses, his blood pooling on the cold concrete. He taught Yuto that people who lash out in violence are usually just terrified cowards. True strength is having the courage to protect others, even when you are afraid. Hiroto screams for the innocent bystander to run away. He believed that shielding the warmth in the world is the ultimate act of bravery. He dies a hero, leaving his son with an impossible standard to live up to. Misaki sweeps the empty gym floor, trying to drown the grief in menial labor. The phone rings, shattering the quiet sanctuary. She answers, hearing the frantic voice of a nurse on the other end. A deep, nauseating dread settles over her. The call she always feared has arrived. He knew he was bleeding out, apologizing for leaving a mess behind. Miho forces out a final, agonizing request to take care of her son. Misaki screams into the receiver, begging her to hold on. The portrait of her best friend mocks her from the wall. Misaki sits faithfully by the bedside, watching her friend fade away. She gently scolds Miho for growing so thin. She pleads with her to wake up and yell at Hiroto for rushing ahead again, but Miho never regains consciousness. The second funeral portrait is placed beside the first. A heavily taped glove strikes the heavy bag. Misaki lies on the gym floor, utterly numb, asking the void what the point of living even is. Yuto doesn't stop swinging. His form is terrible, but his intensity is terrifying. He remembers his father's final command, not to be paralyzed by fear. He throws another wild hook, tears streaming down his face. He vows to grow strong enough to protect others, just like his dad. Misaki stares at the ceiling, feeling entirely inadequate for the task of raising a child. She admits she doesn't know anything about parenting. All she knows is violence. Yuto screams his confirmation without a single ounce of hesitation. She warns him. The road ahead is nothing but endless, agonizing defeat. He doesn't care. He refuses to back down. From this day forward, she is no longer just his guardian. She is his coach. She demands he address her properly. Yuto barks his acknowledgement, his military-style discipline already taking root. Misaki internally apologizes to her dead friends, unsure if she can actually build this kid into anything, but she promises to teach him every single thing she knows. The reality of his physical limitations is staggering. He completely lacks the natural rhythm required to chain movements together fluidly. He has to manually memorize every single micro-adjustment like answers on a math test. He plows ahead through sheer, stubborn repetition. The extraordinary efforts slowly begin to pile up. He starts to metamorphose from a clumsy child into a functioning athlete. He clings to his father's definition of true strength, the courage to be kind in a brutal world. Misaki pushes him harder, demanding 20 more reps. He screams his compliance, his sweat pooling on the gym floor. 10 grueling years pass in this exact punishing rhythm. The surest way to compensate for a lack of talent is to forge an unbreakable body. Yuto grinds out 6 miles the second his feet hit the floor every morning. 2,000 sit-ups follow immediately. He adds brutal weight training to the already terrifying regimen. It is the only mathematical way he can survive in the ring. By his 3rd year of training, his biological growth peak had already flatlined. Misaki steps up to the whiteboard to deliver a harsh lesson in reality to the reporter. She draws the axes. Effort on the bottom, talent on the side. Everyone starts with a blank slate, experiencing the addictive joy of rapid improvement. But eventually, the slope levels out, and the brutal reality of competition begins. The absolute summit of the curve is entirely dictated by genetic talent. A champion's peak is vastly higher than an average pro's peak. By all logical metrics, Yuto shouldn't even be able to secure a pro license, let alone a world title. title. He is the strongest in-fighter on the planet, armed with the worst natural instincts in the sport. One day, he showed up to the gym in a hospital gown, completely soaked from the rain. The narrative rewinds slightly to explain the incident. Yuto adjusts his backpack, projecting confidence as he enters high school. Growing up, he idolized the brightly colored heroes on the television screen, but high school isn't a cartoon. It's a chaotic, anxiety-inducing jungle. Some choose to assert dominance by crushing the weak. Kazu kicks a desk violently into a terrified classmate. The blonde delinquent demands cash with a wicked grin. Yamaguchi stares at the floor, trapped in the role of the perpetual victim. A hand clamps down on the crumpled cash before Kazu can take it. Yuto loudly demands the bully stop terrorizing his classmates. Yamaguchi stares in awe. A genuine hero just stepped out of a comic book. Kazu's face twists in rage as he tries to pull his arm free. Panic briefly flashes in his eyes. The grip is immovable. He curses, realizing he can't physically overpower the new kid. Yuto's reputation for vigilante justice has preceded him. Kazu grits his teeth, realizing he picked a fight with the worst possible target. Kazu throws a desperate, incredibly telegraphed punch. Yuto effortlessly sweeps the leg, dumping the bully onto his back. Kazu screams in frustration, demanding respect he hasn't earned. Yuto completely ignores the tantrum, cheerfully suggesting they all get along. Later, a couple of students complain that Yuto didn't brutally hospitalize the bully. They wanted a bloody spectacle, missing the entire point of true strength. Kazu catches Yamaguchi listening and immediately assumes he's being mocked. Yuto steps out of the stairwell, interrupting the intimidation attempt instantly. He asks the blonde idiot what he actually gains from terrorizing people. Kazu refuses to let the humiliation stand. He admits he picks on the weak simply because it's entertaining. He throws another wild haymaker, completely unhinged. Yuto easily slips the attack. The power of consistent effort is always underestimated. He delivers a flawless judo throw, slamming Kazu into the linoleum. The difference between a guy who acts tough and a guy who bleeds for his strength is night and day. To Yamaguchi, Yuto casts the massive silhouette of a savior. Another bully gets laid out flat on his back in a different encounter. Yamaguchi stares at the unconscious thug, entirely bewildered. The silhouette of the hero remains unbroken in his mind. He realizes that a genuine hero actually exists. The episode title card declares the arrival of the hero. Walking home through the sunset, the skinny kid apologizes for depending on others. Yuto immediately shuts down the self-pity, insisting Yamaguchi has done nothing wrong. Yamaguchi admits his awe. He's never seen anyone with that kind of raw power. Yuto laughs, cheerfully confessing that he doesn't have an ounce of natural talent either. He decides words aren't enough and invites the skinny kid to come see for himself. They arrive at Misaki's gym. She greets them with a terrifyingly intense stare. She assumed her gold medal would bring in customers, but the gym is a ghost town. Misaki zeroes in on the new kid, her eyes burning with predatory capitalism. So she enthusiastically flatters him, calling Yamaguchi a very strong-sounding name. She leans in close, declaring she can see the heart of a champion hiding inside him. She offers a limited-time 50% discount, completely overwhelming his defenses. Yamaguchi turns to Yuto, utterly shocked that learning how to fight costs money. Yuto confirms it, internally calculating exactly how much debt he currently owes her. Yuto begins his workout, ripping into the heavy bag with terrifying force. Yamaguchi marvels at the dedication required to maintain that level of intensity. Misaki whispers the terrifying truth. Yuto works 10 times harder than the pros just to stay relevant. Misaki shakes her head, knowing the boy is questioning his own potential again. She admits it is a biological fact that effort alone has a hard limit, but consistent, eye-punishing effort forces the body to adapt and grow stronger anyway. She doesn't promise it will be easy. She guarantees he can change if he actually tries. The boys say their goodbyes and leave the gym. The quiet of the evening allows Yamaguchi's thoughts to spiral. The dark voice in his head questions if a coward like him can ever truly change. He acknowledges the cruel reality that nobody gets to choose their starting point in life, while others are born directly into the gutter. His home is a disaster zone of trash bags and empty liquor bottles. His mother sits amidst the ruins, slurring her words and asking why he's late. She viciously mocks him, asking how a loser like him could possibly have friends. She screams at him to come straight home after school from now on. She collapses against the bedframe, wallowing in the wreckage of her own life. Her history is a tragedy. She worked in the red light district and was abandoned by a petty criminal. He swallows the request for membership money, knowing it will only start another screaming match. He stands in the dark, entirely enveloped by the suffocating reality of his life. He stares out the window. For some, a normal life requires a ridiculous amount of desperate effort. Across town, the humiliated blonde bully gathers his gang around a burning trash can. A shadow drops into the alleyway, interrupting the plotting. The gang members mock the blonde for getting beat up, ignoring the new arrival. The figure in the dark hoodie announces he's looking for a real fight. The mysterious newcomer flashes a wicked grin. He's finally found a cure for his boredom. Back in the apartment, Yamaguchi stares blankly at the wall, but in the darkest moments, a sudden surge of unknown energy sometimes provides the push needed to survive. Dawn breaks. He forces himself out of the apartment and hits the dirt track. Yuto stops and turns around, surprised to see him out this early. Yamaguchi pants heavily, his lungs screaming from the sudden exertion. He confesses he wants to build his stamina and get a part-time job to pay for the boxing lessons. Yuto pumps his fist, thrilled to have a training partner. Yamaguchi's heart hammers against his ribs, but he nods firmly. He accepts the challenge, ready to put in the work. He pushes his frail legs, gasping for every breath of air. He started at the halfway point, but the gap between them refuses to close. The reality of Yuto's physical conditioning sinks in immediately. He watches the hero's back, marveling at the sheer volume of effort required to maintain that pace. He knows his toxic home environment won't magically fix itself, but as he forces one foot in front of the other, he decides to believe in his own capacity for change. He screams into the morning air, declaring his intention to rise above the filth. He vows to fundamentally change who he is. He finally collapses onto the grass, his body completely spent. Yuto praises his timing. Yuto admits he used to give up easily when he first started running too. He points toward the horizon, telling Yamaguchi to watch his favorite part of the morning routine. The cool morning air fills his lungs, bringing a sudden, intense wave of clarity. He looks out over the city alongside the guy who saved him. The sun crests over the buildings, washing the concrete in brilliant, blinding gold. He watches the light hit the sprawling, cramped neighborhoods. He wonders why people in those tiny boxes spend so much time tormenting each other over petty nonsense. For a brief, beautiful second, the weight of his life vanishes completely. The episode title card flashes. The hero returns. Later at school, the boys share lunch at their desks. The wholesome atmosphere is violently interrupted as a gift box is shoved onto the table. Yuto smiles, politely thanking the blonde bully for the unexpected delivery. Kazu grits his teeth, completely furious. A flashback reveals what happened the night before. Kazu was complaining to the gang leader. The gang leader finds the whole vigilante concept hilarious. A shadowy figure admits he intentionally threw Kazu to the wolves just to see what would happen. The result was total annihilation. The gang lies broken and bleeding on the concrete. The mysterious newcomer single-handedly dismantled the entire crew without breaking a sweat. The gang leader promises to bring the strongest guys directly to him. He asks if this so-called knight errant is actually worth his time. Back in the classroom, Kazu furiously sips a juice box, nursing his wounded pride. He claims he was just caught off guard by the alleyway attack and swears he'll get his revenge. Yuto innocently offers to share the lunch with him. He flashes a massive smile, claiming food tastes better with company. Kazu glares, but Yuto explains his grandmother always packs too much anyway. The perspective shifts back to the previous night. Kazu hits the floor hard. He groans in pain, demanding to know who just attacked him. It is a polite apology note from Yuto, suggesting he use an ice pack on the fresh bruises. Sometimes, genuine kindness is the most humiliating weapon of all. Back in the present, Kazu violently smacks the lunchboxes onto the floor. He screams that he isn't hungry and storms out of the room. Yuto stares at the spilled rice, completely confused by the outburst. Kazu retreats to the stairwell, gripping his hair in frustration. Two other students wander by, gossiping about how Yuto humiliated him. One mentions the rumor that Yuto brutally beat him in an alleyway, completely twisting the truth. Kazu listens to his reputation disintegrate in real time. Time marches on. Yamaguchi gets a part-time job washing dishes. Yuto continues his relentless assault on the heavy bag. Yamaguchi notes that Kazu hasn't shown up to class since the lunchbox incident. He checks his phone during a break at his convenience store job. Yuto does upside-down crunches, screaming through the agonizing core workout. The shadowy figure from the alleyway laughs maniacally as he decimates another local gang. The boys continue their morning runs, pushing their limits under the breaking dawn. Misaki screams for 10 more sets, refusing to let Yuto rest. Yuto bows deeply, thanking his coach for another brutal session. He walks home alone, his phone suddenly buzzing with an incoming video call. He accepts the call. A grinning mouth, partially obscured by a hood, fills the screen. The stranger cheerfully asks if he's speaking to the famous Yuto Takeda. Yuto confirms it. The stranger introduces himself as Kazu. The camera pans down. Yamaguchi sits on the cold concrete of an abandoned building, his hands bound behind his back. Yuto's eyes practically bulge out of his skull. Yamaguchi stares at the floor, battered and terrified. The maniac in the hoodie smiles, declaring himself the anti-hero to Yuto's knight in shining armor. The episode title card officially introduces the anti-hero. The location is an unfinished construction site, skeletal steel reaching into the night sky. Heavy boots step onto the concrete floor. The kidnapper grins, praising Yuto for arriving so quickly. Yuto stands in the shadows, radiating a cold, terrifying fury. He demands to know exactly what the maniac wants. The anti-hero notes that Yuto must have sprinted the entire way, yet isn't even breathing hard. He asks Yuto if he's familiar with video games, framing the entire hostage situation as entertainment. He explains that a game is only fun if the final boss is actually a challenge. He was on a quest to hunt the strongest fighters in the city, but they all broke too easily. He admits he dragged the innocent kid into this just to ensure Yuto took the fight seriously. Yuto doesn't waste waste another second on diplomacy. He explodes forward instantly. The anti-hero effortlessly slides back, his grin widening as he registers the incoming speed. He mocks Yuto's linear approach, wondering if the hero will use a feint or a broken rhythm. He notes the textbook straight punch coming right for his face. Yuto throws everything he has into the strike. The anti-hero effortlessly slips it, stepping entirely outside Yuto's field of vision. Yuto's momentum carries him forward, his eyes wide with shock as the target vanishes. He desperately throws up a guard, trying to protect his flank. The anti-hero scoffs in disappointment. The hero is far too slow. He declares that no matter how much effort Yuto puts in, he fundamentally lacks the talent to survive this. The truth is undeniable. In just a single month of hunting, this unknown ghost single-handedly annihilated every single violent gang in the entire district. The maniac analyzes the champion's opening rush. The velocity is impressive. The raw physical conditioning is undeniable. Kazu sees the muscles tensing, reading the pure athletic power, but that is exactly where the threat ends. He slips beneath the heavy leather, reading the trajectory like an open book. He registers the rigid, textbook geometry of the assault. The combinations are devoid of imagination. The anti-hero feels like he is fighting a poorly programmed arcade boss. He understands the strategy perfectly. Someone forged this fragile frame into a weapon using agonizing repetition, but predictable strength leaves fatal openings. Yuto gasps as the counterattack rattles his ribs. Kazu smirks under his hood. The hero's entire game plan relies on overwhelming average thugs with brute force. He drops his shoulders, eyes coughing as the damage sets in. The anti-hero dances around the champion, dictating the flow of the skirmish. He finds the encounter deeply disappointing. He slips a wide hook and buries a crushing blow directly into Yuto's jaw. The impact lifts the champion off his feet, snapping his head back violently. Yamaguchi watches from the shadows, his eyes wide with horror. He clicks his tongue in pure annoyance. Kazu wraps his hand around Yuto's collar, dragging him down to his level. He delivers a brutal lecture on reality. Yuto is destabilized. The anti-hero asks why someone would possess this level of physical power and waste it trying to protect strangers. He smiles, finding endless entertainment in crushing the weak. A systematic, one-sided pounding against the helpless hero commences. The concrete floor quickly paints itself red. Kazu walks away into the night, his ego inflated by the slaughter. Yamaguchi stares at his fallen savior. His own crushing helplessness swallows him whole. He wanders beneath the flickering streetlights, dragging his feet toward home. He opens the door to his apartment, greeted by the familiar wreckage of shattered bottles and despair. His mother lies motionless amidst the filth, surrendered to the gutter. Yuto sits in his hospital bed, rain lashing against the glass pane behind him. A nurse hands the battered champion a damp envelope. The letter details Yamaguchi's sudden, devastating departure. The skinny kid has quit school to disappear on a commercial fishing boat, driven away by his mother's escalating debts. He admits he spent his entire life wondering what it would feel like to be born under a lucky star. He hoped finding a genuine hero would magically rewrite his destiny, but the brutal reality of the streets crushed that fragile delusion. Yamaguchi considers his brief friendship with Yuto the single brightest moment of his miserable life. He signs off, wishing his broken savior a fast recovery. Yuto crushes the paper in his trembling hands. The agonizing failure acts as a catalyst. The shell begins to crack. The metamorphosis begins. Coach Misaki stares out the window of the empty gym, the heavy rain mirroring her mood. She remembers the exact day the trajectory changed permanently. The doors burst open. Yuto stands in the frame, soaked in a hospital gown. His eyes burn with an unnatural, terrifying fire. He demands to become stronger. Misaki meets his gaze and makes a permanent vow. She promises to forge him into a weapon capable of shattering any obstacle the world throws at him. A brutal, decade-long montage of absolute hell commences. Yuto attacks the pads with a furious, unyielding intensity. Misaki screams in his face, punishing every microsecond of hesitation. She warns him about Kazu. The anti-hero is recognized across the district as a generational prodigy. He represents God-given talent. A talentless brawler has zero mathematical chance of matching his reaction speed, but sheer psychotic willpower can warp mathematics. Yuto drives his fist into the leather until his knuckles bleed. He drags his exhausted body through the dirt tracks at dawn, his lungs burning for oxygen. He scrubs the gym floors on his hands and knees, turning menial labor into discipline. He tracks Kazu down again. I am stepping into another abandoned warehouse. The anti-hero laughs, mocking the champion's complete lack of athletic improvement. Yuto refuses to flinch. He vows to keep challenging the prodigy for 1,000,000 consecutive years if necessary. He promises to never give up. The rematch ends exactly like the first. Yuto hits the concrete floor, flattened. He returns to the gym with a bandaged face, demanding to quit high school entirely to live inside the ring. Misaki debates whether she should protect the boy from this endless cycle of pain. She looks at the framed photograph of his parents. This violent path is the only road his heart accepts. She commits to the madness, ordering him to put his entire soul into the slaughter. The cycle repeats. Sit-ups until his core physically fails, heavy bag drills until the canvas tears open. open. He challenges Kazu once again, and takes another brutal, unforgiving beating. Kazu shatters Yuto's guard, sending him violently into a stack of tires. Still, he crawls back. The anti-hero is genuinely irritated by the sheer obstinacy. He takes another brutal slam to the mat. More weights, more sparring, more broken ribs. He drags massive tires up steep concrete inclines, forging his legs into hydraulic pistons. He sleeps on a tiny cot in the gym storage room, dreaming only of violence. Another day, another relentless challenge. He screams into the void, refusing to yield an inch of ground to his own limitations. The calendar pages rip away. Years pass in a blur of blood, sweat, and shattered bones. He reaches the absolute precipice, the point where the human body traditionally breaks and surrenders. He wraps his gloves one more time. The heavy bag explodes backward from a single concussive strike. Yuto wakes up in his cot, his body functioning entirely on lethal muscle memory. He obliterates the focus mitts. Misaki struggles to absorb the sheer kinetic force radiating from his arms. He returns to the alleyway. Kazu sighs, exhausted by the stalker. The anti-hero throws a massive, contemptuous swing to end the encounter quickly, but the target isn't there. Kazu's eyes widen. A spray of blood erupts across his vision before his brain can register the movement. Misaki's relentless drilling echoes in Yuto's mind. He steps boldly into the pocket and perfectly executes the weaving counter. Misaki watches her student in sheer disbelief. The biological ceiling dictated by his genetics has been shattered. The sheer concussive impact echoes through the concrete structure, so the fragile cocoon splits wide open. Kazu staggers backward, shocked that the punching bag just bit back. Yuto stands tall, his breathing steady, his eyes locked onto his prey. The prodigy admits his surprise. The talentless joke has actually grown fangs. Kazu cracks a wicked smile. He finally gets to use his real speed. Yuto analyzes his own stance. His previous timing was off by a fraction of a second. The winds of change howl through the alleyway. Kazu launches an explosive flurry, determined to put the dog back on its leash. Yuto reads the incoming violence entirely through conditioned instinct. The hero stands over the calm, endless expanse of the ocean. He remembers the exact words Yamaguchi spoke when he surrendered to his miserable fate. Back in the alley, Kazu unleashes a desperate, furious combination. The Misaki had drawn a chart on the whiteboard. Hard work does not grow in a straight line. It grows in sudden, massive leaps after endless periods of agonizing stagnation. Yuto and Yamaguchi sit on the riverbank, bathed in the golden light of the sunrise. The brilliant light washes over the water. A true Superman has been forged in the fires of relentless obsession. The reporter's voice bleeds into the present. He asks the champion what the sport truly means to him. Yuto declares that his fists are living proof. Proof that no matter how deep the sorrow cuts, no matter how oppressive the circumstances, there is always a light waiting at the end of the tunnel. The present day violently crashes into focus. The commentators hype the roaring arena. It is the junior welterweight world title match. The legendary champion against the terrifying anomaly. The crowd noise is deafening. Yu steps through the ropes, his eyes void of all human emotion. He didn't let the legendary Jean-Pierre land a single strike. He dismantled Elliot von Heinberg in 2 short, humiliating rounds. Yuto Takeda marches down the aisle, carrying the massive weight of the crowd's expectations. He is recognized as the undisputed king of infighting, a man who earned his crown by clawing his way out of the dirt, knockdown after knockdown. The bell approaches. Can the symbol of hard work protect his throne from a monster? Misaki sits in a hospital room, forced to watch the broadcast on a tiny screen. The local bartender pauses, wiping a glass, his eyes glued to the television. He swallows hard. The tension is thick enough to cut. The juxtaposition is absolute. The peak of genetic perfection against the peak of human conditioning. Bob Norris predicts the fight won't come down to strategy, but sheer survival time. The odds heavily favor the challenger. Yu's boxing is out of this world. Misaki grips the ropes, desperately reminding Yuto to stick to the practiced game plan. The referee brings them to the center of the ring. Yuto glares into the void. He vows to get back up no matter how many times he hits the canvas. The frail, sickly boy watches from his hospital bed, his tiny hands clenched into fists. The bell screams. Yuto closes the distance instantly, executing a fierce textbook dash. Yu stares down at the incoming assault with utter indifference. The champion lunges forward with incredible ferocity. The monster slips backward, matching the champion's velocity step for step. Mai Misaki watches from the corner, internally demanding Yuto maintain the pressure for all 12 rounds. She knows the challenger possesses a devastating, perfectly timed counter. The strategy is simple, but suicidal. Yuto must strike before Yu can establish his optimal range. Misaki's eyes are wide. She knows this is his only viable tactic. Yuto throws a massive swing, aiming to decapitate the challenger early, but Yu slips it, proving himself to be every outboxer's absolute worst nightmare. The champion is relentless. He refuses to acknowledge the terrifying gap in their reflexes. He clinches, digging deep into his legendary stamina reserves. He throws an uppercut, desperately seeking a connection. Yuto throws another flurry, desperate to cage the beast against the ropes, but Yu pivots sharply, slipping entirely out of the danger zone. The challenger whispers a quiet question, analyzing the champion's geometry. Yuto peeks over his gloves, fully committed to the onslaught. Coach K smirks from the corner, watching the trap spring shut. Yu abruptly drops his hands, abandoning his elusive footwork. The entire arena gasps. The monster just switched to an aggressive infighter's stance. Misaki watches the horror unfold. The bait is perfectly set. Yuto refuses to overthink the insult. He bites down on his mouthpiece and charges. He fires a blistering combination, seeking a clean connection. Coach K watches, unbothered. He grins. The slaughter is imminent. Yu leans in. The two fighters collide in the center of the ring, trading heavy leather. They are locked in a brutal phone booth exchange. Yu throws a concussive hook inside the tight geometry. Yuto's eyes widen in sheer horror. The challenger isn't just fighting back, he is perfectly mirroring Yuto's entire offensive style. Yu slips inside, moving at impossible speed. He lands a devastating hook, moving with supernatural precision. The champion spent his entire life forging these exact movements into his nervous system, and this void-eyed teenager is executing them faster, harder, and better. The realization strikes Yuto like a physical blow. A suffocating realization crushes the champion. The gap is mathematically insurmountable. Yu brutally punishes the hesitation, driving a right cross into Yuto's exposed face. Coach K looks on. He knows what it means to be truly alive. The sheer, undeniable truth floods his mind. No matter how hard he tries, he can never reach this level. Yu continues the barrage, punishing the champion's fragile defense. He absorbs another bone-crushing blow, his vision fragmenting into static. The challenger is actively using the champion's own style to deliver a humiliating one-sided beatdown. Yu lands an apocalyptic straight punch that practically folds Yuto's spine in half. The sheer reaction speed required to dominate the pocket like this is horrifying. The monster shows absolutely zero mercy, dismantling a decade of hard work in 60 seconds. Yuto huffs, desperate for air under the suffocating pressure. Yuto's head snaps back again, blood spraying across the canvas. He desperately throws up a high guard, seeking a brief refuge from the slaughter. Yu batters the guard, the impact sounding like a wrecking ball striking concrete. The champion is physically shoved backward by the relentless assault. The champion's ribs scream under the heavy, suffocating pressure. Misaki grits her teeth, her heart breaking for her student. The bartender stares, sweating bullets over the brutal display. Misaki told him before the match that he couldn't win a pure exchange of blows. The bell mercifully ends the first round, saving Yuto from permanent damage. Misaki screams his name, rushing to the corner. She demands he pull himself together and focus. She admits she is utterly lost on how to advise him against this anomaly. She knows the challenger's strength is absolute, but she orders him to rely purely on his own unique weapon, endure. Coach K laughs from the opposite corner, thoroughly enjoying the psychological destruction. He sneers, dismissing the champion entirely. He recognizes Yuto's archetype, the sports comic hero who gains power through pure adversity. The commentators debate if a comeback is even biologically possible at this stage. Round 2 begins without offering a shred of mercy. The fighters collide instantly in the center. Yu immediately resumes the slaughter, piercing Yuto's defenses with terrifying ease. Yuto throws a wild counter, pushing through the pain. Misaki had ordered him to focus purely on what he does best, endure. She screams for him to just exchange blows and survive the storm. She begs him to remember his training. He throws a wild, desperate counter, ignoring his own self-preservation. Yu punishes the opening immediately, cracking a sharp jab across Yuto's temple. The champion refuses to fall, blindly marching forward into the wood chipper. The sick child watches the screen, his tiny hands gripping his hospital gown. Yuto throws punches at the exact same time he absorbs catastrophic damage. He relies entirely on his unbreakable chin, trusting his bones to hold together. Misaki watches in horror as the damage rapidly accumulates on her fighter's face. Bob Norris points out the terrifying reality. Coach K's monster is barely even sweating. The void stares back, untouched by the champion's desperate efforts. Yu whispers another cold assessment. Bored by the champion's rugged tactics, he violently redirects the assault, cutting angles Yuto cannot even perceive. The champion's right eye swells shut, drastically reducing his field of vision. He hits the canvas hard, the referee rushing in to intervene. Misaki curses. The plan to close the distance is utterly failing. Yu's footwork is too pristine. He maintains the exact geometric distance required to dictate the violence. Yuto throws another ragged swing, missing entirely. Another concussive impact sends Yuto crashing back down into the abyss. The referee hovers closely, heavily considering ending the tragedy right now. Misaki covers her mouth, unable to watch the brutal execution of her closest friend's son. The sick boy clutches his sheets, tears pricking his eyes. The bartender watches in sheer agony, begging for a turn of the tide. The referee reaches the count of 8, demanding to know if this the champion can continue. The crowd erupts into a deafening roar, their voices shaking the arena lights. A fan screams his name, breaking the tense silence. Yuto surges upright, throwing himself back into the grinder with a furious battle cry. He understands the mind-numbing pain and loneliness that true effort demands. The flashback reveals Misaki proudly watching Yuto and Yamaguchi in their youth. He forces his failing legs to push forward, ignoring the burning agony in his calves. He slumps against the ropes momentarily, his tank completely empty. Misaki begs him to listen to reason. She tells him he can rest now. He has done enough. The flashback shows the grueling preparation, the endless climbing and pushing past exhaustion. Back in the present, the roar of the crowd validates his stubborn refusal to die. He drops to his knees, his body screaming for an end to the trauma. Misaki watches her student break down before her eyes. He gasps for air, forcing oxygen back into his bruised, battered lungs. The bartender clenches his towel, screaming for the champion to rise. Yuto drags himself to his feet once again, defying all medical logic. He forces a bloody smile, assuring himself that he still has a chance. He refuses to let the monster dictate his ending. The referee signals the continuation of the brutal affair. Yu's jab cuts through the air, blindingly fast and painfully accurate. Yuto accepts the incoming strike. He has to trade blood for distance. He eats a massive cross directly to the jaw just to step 3 inches closer. He throws a desperate hook, slicing through empty space as Yu pivots away. The commentators scream in disbelief. The champion's recovery speed is genuinely terrifying. Yu punishes the missed swing with a devastating body shot. He debates whether he should turtle up or backstep to survive the remaining seconds. Yuto bites his lip, refusing to retreat. Running away guarantees a permanent defeat. The heavy impacts echo like cannon fire in the enclosed arena. Misaki screams for him to hold his ground, her voice cracking with desperation. Yuto throws another ragged swing, missing entirely. He executes an explosive dash, intentionally disrupting the challenger's pristine timing. He charges in like a wounded bull, relying purely on raw courage to survive the pocket. Yu's hollow eyes widen a fraction of an inch. The prey refuses to accept its role. They cross the halfway point of the gruesome second round. Yuto's physical structure begins to slow down, his muscles saturated with lactic acid. He throws a wide, sloppy hook, his technique degrading under the extreme trauma. He knows leaving himself open means an immediate, violent end. Yu lands another sickening uppercut, snapping Yuto's posture. The champion hits the canvas for the second time in the round. He tightly grips the corner of the referee's shirt, pulling himself back from the brink of unconsciousness. The referee screams the count in his face. 4. The sick boy watches, terrified that his hero has finally broken. The audience holds its collective breath, waiting for the inevitable end. Yuto forces his heavy boots to plant firmly onto the canvas. He stands tall, staring directly into the eyes of the monster. His knees tremble uncontrollably, barely able to support his own weight. He raises his battered green gloves, ignoring the massive pool of blood on the floor. The crowd loses their minds. The man is indestructible. The referee looks closely at the battered champion, ready to wave it off. Bob Norris cannot confirm if the champion is even lucid anymore. The referee hovers nervously, ready to catch the falling giant. The roaring chanting floods the stadium. Yuto's name echoes off the rafters. He remembers exactly why he pushes his body past the point of failure. The flashback reveals Yamaguchi proudly standing in front of his own small fruit stand. His mother is finally getting treatment. Their lives were saved because of the champion's inspiration. The brutal reality of the match shatters the peaceful memory. Yu drives another crushing combination into Yuto's ribs, seeking a structural collapse. The challenger lands a stiff right cross, actively hunting for the off switch. The bell screams, instantly pausing the slaughter. The champion survived round 2. Misaki rushes into the ring, frantically applying an ice pack to his ruined face. She screams at him to pull himself together, her composure gone. Yuto admits he doesn't know what he's doing anymore. The gap is just too vast. She lies to him, desperately claiming he's following the plan perfectly. Misaki turns away, her heart heavy with crushing guilt. She wonders if dragging him into this brutal, violent life was the biggest mistake she ever made. A normal, quiet life would have spared him from this apocalyptic beating. Round 3 begins. The execution resumes. Yuto is blasted onto the canvas, his face buried in the bloody mat. The shadowy figures of his parents and friends anchor him to the waking world. Coach K admits the kid has a terrifying amount of spirit, but Yu is actively evolving in real time, learning how to dismantle the infighting style with every passing second. Coach K orders his monster to keep absorbing experience until the final kill. Round 4 begins. Yuto's head gets snapped violently backward. Round 5 bleeds into round 6. The match reaches the midway point of absolute hell. The two fighters clash in the center. The arena has turned into an execution chamber. The champion champion refuses to stop pressing forward, immune to the concept of surrender. Yu stares at the bloody mess in front of him, devoid of empathy. Coach K taunts his own fighter, asking how it feels to finally face someone who refuses to break. Yu answers by burying a terrifying uppercut directly into Yuto's jaw. The sick child bursts into tears, unable to watch the brutal slaughter anymore. The bartender screams at the television, demanding Yuto pull off a miracle. The champion hits the floor once again, the referee aggressively initiating another count. Misaki bites her lip hard enough to draw blood. She wants to throw the towel. The referee reaches 3. The arena is entirely silent. Yuto lies completely prone, his body fully saturated with trauma. The ghost of Yamaguchi screams his name. Misaki invited him up to the roof years ago, trying to force him to quit. She told him his endless, agonizing efforts were destroying his body for nothing. She warned him that some biological gaps can never be bridged, no matter how much willpower is applied. She asked him what he would do when faced with an obstacle he literally could not defeat, and Yuto smiled, promising he would just keep trying his best until the very end. Misaki remembers the quiet confession on the rooftop. She remembers his chilling prediction about breaking down. The boy who pushed his body to the absolute breaking point admitted he was terrified of shattering, but Yuto has pushed far beyond his own frail limits. He swallowed the fear because of the people he loved, because life itself, with all its agonizing pain, was a gift he refused to waste. He embraces the suffering, the weight of the world, the expectations, the desperate effort. The battered champion surrenders his burden to the mat. He finds absolute, radiant freedom in the center of the slaughterhouse. The commentators freeze. The entire stadium holds its collective breath as the dust clears. Yuto drags his mangled body back upright, defying every known law of biology. The arena erupts into a deafening, unified roar for the indestructible king. The sheer resilience is absolutely mind-blowing to the fans. The sick boy covers his mouth, tears spilling over his cheeks. The bartender watches in sheer disbelief. Misaki stares at her student, her breath catching in her throat. Yuto squares up, entirely disconnected from his own physical agony. He slips the incoming jab with flawless precision and fires a blistering counter right into the monster's space. He closes the distance with terrifying velocity. Coach K narrows his eyes, sensing the impossible shift in momentum. Misaki grips the ropes, stunned by the sudden change in rhythm. The champion is actually forcing the void backward. A heavy swing grazes Yu's cheek, drawing first blood. Misaki watches the miracle unfold before her eyes. The absolute freedom of movement reserved only for natural-born geniuses. Yuto clawed his way to that exact summit using nothing but sheer, psychotic willpower. He has artificially acquired the talent he was denied at birth. He weaves deeply into Yu's blind spot. A genuine monster forged entirely from human effort is born. He detonates a massive right hook against Yu's guard. Yuto exhales, his body completely, finally spent. The referee watches closely, ready to jump in at any second. Yu's eyes narrow as he processes the incoming threat. Yu is shoved backward by the concussive force. He looks up through the blinding stadium lights. A brilliant golden silhouette paints itself across his vision, the shadow of Aaron Tide, the ultimate untouchable prey. Yu smiles. A genuine, terrifying grin spreads across his face. The bell screams through the arena, his body drained of everything. Yuto slumps against the ropes. He drifts into unconsciousness before his knees even hit the mat. The white towel sails over the ropes, signaling the end of the war. Coach Misaki has officially surrendered the match. The medical team rushes in with a stretcher before the dust can even settle. The former champion is strapped to a stretcher, his face bruised and broken, but peacefully asleep. Misaki's face darkens with a lethal, terrifying rage. Deep in the arena corridors, Misaki intercepts the enemy. She screams at Coach K, demanding to know if he was intentionally trying to murder her fighter. Coach K doesn't even blink. He doesn't even view this as a real boxing match. He dismisses the spectacle as amateur hour. He looks down at her with pure disdain, labeling the entire gym as monsters. The sheer disrespect is deafening as he turns his back. He walks away, leaving her trembling in the quiet hallway. Episode 51 begins. The finish line. The doctor delivers the crushing verdict. Yuto's jaw is shattered beyond repair. He will never step into a ring again. Misaki stands over the hospital bed, the guilt burying her alive. She feels absolutely responsible for the devastating outcome. She breaks down, apologizing for failing the parents who entrusted their son to her care. A muffled, ragged voice cuts through her despair. His body is entirely wrapped, barely clinging to consciousness. Yuto forces his swollen eyes open. He pushes a weak, ragged breath through the pain. He calls out to his coach, his voice raw. The tears finally break, her stoic exterior completely shattered. The memory of the clumsy, talentless kid hitting the bag flashes through her mind. He smiles warmly beneath the heavy bandages, thanking thanking her for building him into a champion. The weeks pass. The former king makes a miraculous, stable recovery. Misaki discusses his discharge with the attending doctor. The hospital door clicks open. The corridors echo with the quiet weight of survival. The sick boy stands in the frame, trembling with excitement. His mother explains the daily suffocating terror her son lives with. Watching Yuto refuse to stay down gave the boy the courage to fight his own battles. He promises to become a strong boxer, just like his hero. Yuto listens, the ghost of his brave father smiling down at him. He answers the question he has been asking himself for 10 years. He is finally strong enough. The tears break free, washing away the decades of agonizing pain. The empty ring stands as a silent monument to his final, brutal battle. With 31 wins and 5 losses, junior welterweight world champion Yuto Takeda officially crosses his finish line. The narrative violently pivots to the middleweight division. Enter Fabrizio Santorino. Beside him sits Marco Santorino, trainer, manager, and chief architect of chaos. They know exactly who is tearing through the ranks to find them. Marco has carefully studied the trajectory of the newest prodigy. Fabrizio flashes a manic grin, starving for the violence. Yu's conquest of the boxing world has been swift, bloody, and entirely unprecedented. He mows down the junior middleweight champion without taking a single clean hit. He easily drops another top-ranking contender to the mat. 4 weight divisions conquered. The pace is terrifying. The commentators lose their minds over the flawless record. The global boxing community is completely consumed by the impending clash with the Santorino brothers. The stadium is packed to the rafters for Fabrizio's latest event. But the champion isn't fighting today. He hijacks the canvas. Marco predicted they wouldn't quietly wait for a scheduled match. Fabrizio saunters into the ring, flanked by heavy security. He snatches the microphone directly from the terrified announcer. He screams at the crowd, demanding absolute silence. He turns his attention straight to Yu and Coach K sitting ringside. He mocks the rookie for taking 4 belts without taking a scratch. The crowd demands to know what the madman wants. He pulls a loaded handgun from his jacket. The arena erupts into sheer panic. Fabrizio laughs like a complete psychopath, thriving on the terror. He holds the gun steady, enjoying the absolute power of the moment. He racks the slide back. He fires straight up, but only confetti rains down on the ringside seats. He mocks the entire arena for flinching at a prop. The crowd erupts in fury, hurling curses at the unbothered champion. 2 more shots echo through the rafters just for the thrill of it. He raises the smoking barrel into the air, a dark shadow against the stadium lights. Fabrizio's blood-red eyes lock onto the target with lethal intent. He looks Yu dead in the eyes and promises to legally murder him inside the ring. Coach K just smiles. He loves a good performance. Episode 52 begins. Challenge. The scene shifts to a cold, empty room wrapped in dark tension. Yu stares blankly at a closed door, the threat completely failing to register. The handle slowly turns. A shadow looms in the doorway, breaking the dead silence. A doorbell rings, piercing the quiet tension. Yu opens the door, unbothered by the sudden interruption. Carmen, Coach K's sharp-eyed assistant, escorts Yu into a secluded safe house. A stray black cat immediately demands attention from the void-eyed fighter. Carmen announces a complete, mandatory lockdown until match day. Yu stares at her, wondering why a massive bodyguard detail is necessary. Carmen points out the hidden lenses already installed in the walls. She gestures to the ceiling, indicating they are already being watched. A flashback reveals a worker in a full hazmat suit delivering a taped box. They are dealing with professionals who operate entirely outside the rulebook. The package contained the headless corpse of a stray cat. Pure psychological warfare. Marco Santorino specializes in breaking opponents before they ever lace up their gloves. He destroys their minds, their sleep, and their sanity. He creates a suffocating environment of paranoia and fear. Carmen refuses to let her fighter become another statistic. Yu stares blankly at the screen, unfazed by the gruesome gift. Marco watches the surveillance feed from his office, entirely amused by the resistance. Carmen dumps 10 cameras and 20 wiretaps onto the living room table. The perimeter of the safe house is heavily secured by private guards. She pulls up the history of Chavo Urus, the former undisputed champion. Chavo was a titan, the only man physically capable of rivaling Bob Norris. He cornered opponents and buried them under heavyweight-level rapid-fire barrages. They are completely unlike any regular human athletes, but his reign ended abruptly when Fabrizio dismantled him. Chavo entered the ring suffering from acute pancreatitis, depression, and severe panic attacks. Marco pulled the strings from the shadows, orchestrating the physical and mental collapse. If Marco can't win in the ring, he destroys them outside of it. Carmen sets the boundary. Yu can only eat, drink, and sleep under her direct supervision. The war has already started. Carmen reviews the footage, analyzing his dangerously simple routine. The psychological pressure of this lockdown would break a normal athlete, but Yu's mind is a fortress of absolute, unbothered emptiness. So Carmen arrives at the gym the next morning to begin her escort duty. duty. She officially assigns herself as his permanent shadow. She dictates the strict travel protocol as they walk. She assures him the Santorinos won't risk a direct assassination before the bell. Yu tells her bluntly to evacuate if they get ambushed. He states with zero inflection that he can protect himself. Back at the safe house, Carmen takes over the cooking. Every ingredient is sourced through verified, secure channels. She guarantees her meals are entirely free of tampering. She serves up a massive, meticulously prepared feast. She watches him closely, waiting for a shred of human reaction. She notices a subtle shift in his usually deadpan expression. Yu stares at the plate, an unreadable expression settling on his features. He immediately throws up the first bite. Her hand trembles slightly as she raises the spoon. Carmen realizes her cooking skills might actually be deadlier than Marco's poison. The taste is an absolute biohazard. Even the cat is visibly traumatized by the meal. Later that night, the bathroom door opens in a thick cloud of steam. Yu steps out, toweling off his hair. He apologizes for the intrusion, entirely unbothered by the awkwardness. Carmen blushes heavily, desperately trying to maintain her professional composure. The frail, skinny kid from the alleyway has vanished, replaced by a weaponized physique. She insists he take the bed while she sleeps on the floor for immediate security. They lie on separate mattresses in the quiet dark. She studies his face in the dim light, looking for a crack in the armor. Carmen reflects on his hilarious reaction to her terrible food. She wants to believe there is still a genuine human side buried beneath the void. Outside, the guards maintain a tight perimeter around the property. They review the daily surveillance footage, ensuring no breaches. Coach K nods in approval from his office. The plan is holding. The next morning, Yu hits the pavement for his grueling roadwork. Carmen attempts to jog alongside him and instantly regrets every life choice she's ever made. The quadruple champion's stamina is completely inhuman. She looks like a staggering zombie by the time they finish. She forbids him from ever leaving the house by himself again. Episode 54 begins. Prelude to War, Part 2. Coach K pulls up the tape of Fabrizio's latest title defense. The challenger is John Renault, a veteran fighter looking for glory. Renault is completely consumed by rage before the bell even rings. Renault's corner desperately tries to keep their fighter focused on the game plan. He screams his intent to murder the champion. Fabrizio instantly leads the fight with a blatant, sickening headbutt, followed immediately by a vicious elbow strike to the jaw. Coach K explains the grim reality. Fabrizio drags champions down into the mud. He ignores defense, ignores points, and turns a regulated sport into a street execution. Fabrizio thrives in this exact kind of lawless, primitive violence. The sheer lawlessness of the bout drives disciplined opponents insane. The referee completely ignores every single foul Fabrizio commits. Fabrizio is heavily doped, enhancing his pain tolerance to absurd, unnatural levels. The crowd goes wild for the unfiltered brutality. On out to the Santorino brothers, boxing isn't a sacred martial art, it's show business. Raw, unfiltered violence pays the bills perfectly. Fabrizio lands another skull-crushing headbutt, splitting Renault's nose wide open. The corrupt referee finally issues a warning to Renault. Marco smiles, knowing exactly how to manipulate the corrupt system. Renault loses his mind and throws a desperate, wild haymaker. Fabrizio literally bites down on his shoulder mid-clinch. The commentators laugh off the grotesque display of unsportsmanlike conduct. The Boxing Association turns a blind eye because the Santorinos generate massive revenue. Renault is utterly dismantled in the chaotic, bloody brawl. A flashback cuts to Renault's daughter, Natalie, begging him not to take the fight. The memory of her innocent excitement twists the knife even deeper. Marco had manipulated her, feeding her vicious rumors about her own father. She screamed that Fabrizio was actually a good person, thoroughly brainwashed by the manager. She defended the monster, blind to the grim reality of the sport. Renault's stoic composure broke the moment his family was mentally targeted. The pouring rain masks the tears of a daughter realizing her mistake too late. She watches her father get slaughtered on live television. During the clinch, Fabrizio taunts Renault, asking to marry his daughter. Fabrizio leans in close, his voice dripping with venom. The psychological strike shatters Renault's guard, opening him up for a devastating hook. The match ends with Renault a broken, weeping wreck on the canvas, a perfect execution. Marco watches his psychological poison do the heavy lifting. Yu watches the screen, eyes completely unblinking, absorbing the depravity. Episode 55 begins. The intimidation tactics escalate. Carmen follows close behind as they navigate the city streets. She spots a stumbling drunk moving erratically toward them. She immediately clocks the suspicious man lurking on the path. A flashback reveals Marco paying off local street thugs. He hands them a loaded syringe and a thick stack of cash. He casually claims it's just a harmless vaccine. The thugs hollow out a glass beer bottle to use as a distraction. The trap is set. The drunk intentionally drops the bottle right in the kill zone. Carmen holds a strict briefing on the protocol for the upcoming bout. Two more armed thugs sprint out from the bushes. The ambush is triggered flawlessly. Carmen curses her miscalculation. She hadn't cleared out all the local moles. They scream demands, desperate to drag him into a public scandal. Marco's plan is deeply layered. If physical violence fails, media manipulation follows immediately. A mob of bribed reporters swarms the property gates. They hurl entirely fabricated allegations about tax evasion and fan threats. Carmen easily blocks the media circus. Backed by the gym's overwhelming legal funds, packages are intercepted. Gifts are incinerated. No exceptions. She enforces the lockdown with ruthless, terrifying efficiency. The Santorinos draw the line at actual murder, unless it involves an animal. Coach K sits in his office, quietly stroking the rescued black cat. He watches the footage, rubbing his chin in deep thought. 5 years have passed since K found the hollow boy in that rainy alleyway. He knows if Yu reaches the middleweight ring safely, the title is guaranteed. But the ultimate terrifying question remains. If Yu actually defeats Tide, what happens to the monster when the hunt is over? An unsuspecting civilian wanders into the dangerous territory. Back in the present, the armed thugs demand a toll from the isolated duo. Carmen remembers Yu's cold, flat statement about protecting himself. Yu moves before the thug's brain can even register the blur. He disarms the attacker and secures the weapon in a fraction of a second. Gravity reclaims the thugs. They hit the pavement groaning in sudden agony. Carmen grabs Yu's wrist, desperately stopping his arm mid-swing. She looks into his void-like eyes and realizes the horrifying truth. He wasn't defending himself. He was about to execute them. The stolen gun is gripped loosely in his hand, ready to fire. She stares at the hollow shell of a human being, realizing the depth of his emptiness. She frantically searches for any way to break the lethal tension. Desperate to anchor him to reality, she blurts out an invitation for a date. Yu stares at her, confused by the sudden shift in tone, but agrees. The sky is brilliant and perfectly clear for the promised outing. Carmen descends the stairs, dressed sharp and ready to go. She apologizes for taking so long to get ready. She waits for some kind of compliment on her outfit. Yu just stares blankly, wearing his standard worn-out gray sweatpants. She refuses to let him step out looking like a sleep-deprived ghost. Carmen refuses to be seen in public with him looking like a gym rat. She forces him into a chair and fires up the blow-dryer. She asks if Coach K was the one who designed his usual look. She styles his hair, genuinely impressed by how much it changes his entire face. Next stop, complete wardrobe reconstruction. Yu stares nervously at the endless racks of high-end clothing. Carmen hands him something completely absurd with a massive grin. She excitedly presents a flamboyant, heavily decorated jacket. He steps out of the fitting room, looking like a bizarre European prince. Carmen covers her mouth, desperately trying to hide her laughter. She forces him into a loud Hawaiian shirt and tacky sunglasses, then a dramatic, open-chest romance novel cover outfit, then a full, unironic Where's Waldo ensemble, and finally, a giant, ridiculous bear onesie. He finally settles on a sharp-tailored navy suit and brown dress shoes. He steps out of the booth, actually looking like a proper, wealthy gentleman. Carmen is genuinely stunned by the massive cleanup. Yu gives her a blank stare, unsure of how to respond. She buys the suit and they head out for the day. They arrive at the massive, sprawling city amusement park. It's packed with tourists, bright lights, and towering attractions. They strap into the front row of the tallest, steepest roller coaster. The black cat is somehow strapped into the harness right between them. Carmen screams in pure, exhilarated joy as the coaster plummets down the track. Yu sits right beside her, his face completely, hilariously deadpan through the entire drop. They end the chaotic day floating in a tiny boat, surrounded by giant animatronic dinosaurs. The date continues with a trip to the haunted house. The stray cat completely loses its mind at the entrance. Yu just watches the animatronics with the same blank stare. He gives a heavy bag. The amusement park looks beautiful in the afternoon light, but Carmen struggles to get a single human emotion out of him. She even buys him a pair of cat ears to lighten the mood. The photographer counts down, and the result is profoundly unsettling. Yu's attempt at a natural smile looks like a hostage situation. Carmen decides it is time for a crash course in basic human facial expressions. She physically manipulates his cheeks, trying to forge a smile out of pure muscle memory. Yu attempts to replicate the data. The result is a sleep paralysis demon. Carmen immediately abandons the lesson. Some things cannot be taught. They reach the entrance of the main horror attraction. Carmen thinks the haunted house is the ultimate strategy to break the ice. She briefs him on the rules. Under no circumstances is he allowed to punch the employees. Yu's face remains absolutely impassive while she talks. A zombie actor bursts from the shadows with a terrifying shriek. Carmen loses her own composure and batters the poor employee with her handbag. The actor hits the floor, regretting his career choices. They exit the attraction. Carmen wipes the sweat from her brow, acting like she didn't just assault a minimum wage worker. A horde of ghouls immediately descends on them. Yu's expression remains dead inside the dark tunnel. She screams again. It is Jean-Pierre, the former lightweight champion, looking entirely different in casual casual clothes. He introduces his wife Stella and his young daughter to the prodigy who took his belt. Yu just stares, unsure of how to navigate a normal social interaction. Stella is visibly defensive, still holding a grudge over the brutal defeat her husband suffered. Jean-Pierre quickly steps in to diffuse his wife's protective anger. The cat meows happily, oblivious to the tension. They sit down for drinks at a nearby cafe. The atmosphere is thick enough to cut with a knife. Jean-Pierre admits he still remembers every single subtle movement Yu made in the ring, but looking at him now, sitting quietly with a lemonade, the monster feels different. Maria tugs at her father's sleeve, demanding ice cream. Suddenly, Jean-Pierre's arm blurs in a flash of motion. He effortlessly catches 6 falling ice cream cones in a single hand before his daughter can even blink. Jean-Pierre looks down at his daughter, a gentle smile replacing the fighter's edge. Carmen uses the opportunity to ask the veteran about Marco Santorino's active days in the ring. Jean-Pierre remembers his title match against the elder Santorino brother vividly. Marco was a boxer who perfectly offset his weak physical stats with absolute terrifying ring IQ. He compensated for his physical limitations with an incredibly sharp mind. He was a strategic genius, driven by a frightening, obsessive desperation to win. Jean-Pierre warns them heavily. Yu's physical strength is undeniable, but Marco's mind games should never be underestimated. They part ways. The encounter leaves a heavy shadow over the rest of the evening. The giant Ferris wheel glows against the night sky. Later that night, in front of the illuminated fountain, Carmen asks the question that has been bothering her all day. He admits he thought he saw the light for a brief moment. She asks if he ever found the light he was desperately searching for in the boxing ring. Yu admits he hasn't. The void is still just as empty as the day he started. Carmen leans in. She asks why he doesn't just walk away and live a normal, ordinary life. Maybe he can find what he's looking for outside the ring. A massive firework detonates in the night sky, drowning out the silence. She hopes the light he's looking for might be right beside him. They watch the brilliant display, the colors reflecting in Yu's hollow eyes. A strange girl leans in, wearing a deeply unsettling grin. The girl grabs Carmen's hands with feigned excitement. She ignores Yu and locks eyes directly with Carmen. She drops a chilling message. Marco Santorino wants to meet her in person. The girl slips a folded note into Carmen's hand and practically dances away into the dark. Yu looks down, unbothered, asking what the interruption was about. Carmen rips the note to shreds without a second of hesitation. She tosses the pieces into the wind, refusing to play Marco's psychological games. She forces a bright smile, determined not to let the Santorinos ruin the best day they've had in months. She asks if he would like to go out again. The next morning, the consequences arrive. Coach K sits in his office, radiating lethal intent. He slams his fist onto the desk, his voice a low, dangerous growl. The bodyguard is ordered to bring Carmen to the office immediately. He demands to know who gave Carmen authorization to take his ultimate weapon to a public amusement park. K demands to know if she has developed personal feelings for his fighter. He assigned her to guard Yu's life, not to expose him to a sniper's bullet. Effective immediately, Carmen is permanently dismissed from her security detail. Coach K replaces her with his own heavy hitters. The lockdown is now absolute. That evening, Carmen arrives at her apartment door, her shoulders heavy with the sting of failure. The memory of Yu's cold assessment echoes in her head. Yu wanders the dark city streets alone, the echoes of Carmen's question haunting his thoughts. In a stark white hospital room, Carmen lies motionless, buried under heavy bandages and a thick neck brace. Coach K looks down at his former assistant. She was found bleeding out in front of her apartment block. He curses his own carelessness. Marco Santorino noticed the growing attachment and severed the weakest link. Coach K turns to Yu. He tells the boy to ignore the bait and focus entirely on the execution. The only way to get true revenge is to utterly dismantle Fabrizio inside the ring. The press conference for the middleweight world title is about to begin. Yu stops at the door, glancing back at the broken girl who tried to show him the light. The cameras flash furiously. The tension on the podium is thick enough to choke on. Marco smiles his practiced, slimy PR smile, greeting Coach K with mock respect. Coach K stares back with pure, unfiltered disgust. He's already tired of the circus act. The moderator asks the trainers to give their professional impressions of each other. Marco takes the mic. He weaponizes his words, calling Coach K's thirst for victory a frightening, insatiable obsession. He publicly accuses K of treating boxers like disposable toys, breaking their minds and bodies for his own glory. Marco argues that any sane person would run away from a coach like K. He claims Yu is just as psychotic as his master. K leans into the mic and immediately calls Marco a prostitute's son. The entire press pool audibly gasps. The sheer disrespect completely derails the broadcast. Coach K invites him to try his luck. Fabrizio loses his mind. He lunges across the table, ready to murder K right then and there. Marco catches his brother, desperately holding the rabid dog back from a lawsuit. Fabrizio grabs the mic, refusing to be silenced. He snarls into the cameras, promising to legally execute Yu once the bell rings. He promises to kill the referee if they try to stop the massacre. The microphone shifts to Yu. The void stares back at the flashing lights. In the hospital room, Yu's thoughts drift back to Carmen. The memory of Coach K's chilling words rings in his his ears. He remembers her asking if hitting people actually brought him any joy. Yu stares into the dark waters of the aquarium tank. He remembers the blood, the crunch of bone, the terrified look in his opponent's eyes. Yu leans into the microphone. His voice is cold, flat, and devoid of mercy. He announces that he has zero intention of letting Fabrizio off easy with a quick knockout. The reporters scramble to record the chilling threat. A terrifying, genuine smile breaks across Yu's face. The monster has officially accepted the invitation. The moderator freezes, the sheer malice radiating from the challenger silencing the room. Deep in the Santorino training facility, Marco's frustration boils over. The psychological attack completely failed. A fresh syringe sits on a cold metal tray. Fabrizio inspects his veins. He's actively testing Marco's newest acquisition. Marco confirms the quality of the military-grade stimulant. The drug hits his bloodstream, amplifying his senses and erasing his pain receptors entirely. Marco warns him about the lethal dosage limits. The combat stimulant will literally tear his heart apart if he takes too much. Yu walks down the dark tunnel, chains hanging from the ceiling. The IV drips steadily. The Santorinos are fully committed to chemical warfare. Episode 59. An eye for an eye. The day of the execution has finally arrived. The lead commentator screams into his headset, hyping the unprecedented rise of the quadruple weight champion. The arena is completely sold out. The noise shakes the structural pillars of the stadium. Fabrizio makes his entrance, consumed by the roaring bloodlust of his home crowd. Yu steps up to the ropes. The fans shower him with praise and hurl vicious insults at the silent challenger entering the tunnel. A literal storm of fake $100 bills rains down from the rafters. The Santorinos know how to put on a show. Marco claims Fabrizio is still the highest-paid troublemaker in boxing. Marco flips off the cameras, eating up the villain role perfectly. The pre-match inspection is intensely strict. The referee personally wraps Fabrizio's hands inside the ring. Marco's previous plaster-smearing scandal forced the Athletic Commission to enforce this public humiliation. But Marco just smiles. The clean wraps are nothing but a smokescreen for the real cheat coursing through Fabrizio's veins. Bob Norris analyzes the tactical spread. If you made it to the ring safely, the math heavily favors the challenger. Bob Norris points out the obvious change in Fabrizio's physique. Fabrizio's muscles bulge unnaturally, the chemical cocktail turning him into a biological weapon. Coach K narrows his eyes, recognizing the chemical enhancement. The referee brings them to the center. The most anticipated match of the year is seconds away. Fabrizio grins like a complete psychopath. Yu's eyes are locked onto his target, devoid of a single human emotion. The bell screams. The war begins. Fabrizio explodes off the canvas with terrifying, ungodly velocity. Marco admits they have to become monsters to beat a monster. The crowd loses their minds. The drugged champion is actually forcing Yu to backstep. Fabrizio throws a blistering combination, pushing the physical limits of his chemically enhanced muscles. Marco watches proudly from the corner. His brother's physical stats are monstrous, but his mind remains coldly tactical. Fabrizio knows he can't win a pure contest of reflexes against a natural-born god. Marco knows Yu's perfect defensive record implies a psychological obsession with not getting hit. He plans to weaponize the referee's blind eye. He drops his guard completely, practically begging for a strike. It's a calculated trap. He plans to eat a minor blow just to drag Yu into a suffocating, foul-heavy clinch. Where Marco analyzes the geometry. Yu will undoubtedly choose to dodge and counter, because that is what his talent demands. Fabrizio leans in, intentionally exposing a massive blind spot on his left side. Yu's fist moves faster than the human eye can track. Yu's red eye tracks the movement with terrifying precision. The concussive impact echoes through the rafters. Fabrizio hits the canvas hard, blood instantly spraying from his shattered nose. The entire stadium falls into a stunned, absolute silence. Marco stares in disbelief. The perfect trap was just violently dismantled. Yu's strike wasn't a standard counter. He actively modified his trajectory mid-swing to bypass the guard entirely. The referee starts the count. Fabrizio drags his battered body upward, his chemically enhanced brain struggling to process the failure. He barks at the referee to waive the count and restart the slaughter. The match immediately resumes. The moment the fight resumes, Yu's fist detonates against Fabrizio's skull again. The champion's eyes roll back. The sheer kinetic force is liquefying his equilibrium. Carmen watches the broadcast from her hospital bed, her single visible eye wide with horror. The heavy door to her room clicks shut. Episode 60. Deal. Carmen's fragmented past bleeds into the present. The earliest memory she retains is the blinding terror of staring down the barrel of a terrorist's rifle. Her father, a foreign diplomat, was executed right in front of her. The psychological shock was absolute. Her brain simply shut down, refusing to process the apocalyptic trauma. Days later, her mother succumbed to her injuries. The darkness swallowed the young girl entirely. The memory shifts to a military extraction. A stern-faced soldier wrapped her in a blanket and carried her out of the hellscape. That soldier was Coach K. He funded her recovery, paid for her education, and gave her a reason to keep breathing. When she came of age, she immediately sought out the Lions Boxing Club to repay her life debt. But the man who saved her had fundamentally changed. His eyes were colder. His obsession had consumed him. The memory violently crashes back into the current timeline. Carmen sits tied to a metal chair in a dimly lit interrogation room. She reassures herself that she hasn't been harmed yet. Marco Santorino paces around her, thoroughly enjoying his psychological dominance. Marco claims things would have been nicer if she accepted his invitation politely. He assures her this isn't a physical kidnapping. He just wants to have a polite, entirely unrecorded conversation. Marco gets straight to the poison. He asks Carmen what she honestly thinks of the monster she's been guarding. Carmen maintains her stoic professionalism, refusing to give him a single inch of ground. Marco asks if she wishes Yu could lead a more normal life, but Marco knows exactly where to apply the pressure. He targets her quiet, desperate hope that Yu can still be saved. Marco details the grim reality. Coach K doesn't see Yu as a human being. He sees him as a mathematical tool to defeat Aaron Tide. Once the tool serves its purpose, K will discard it. The boy is destined to become an empty, broken shell. Marco insists K will eventually turn the boy into a complete monster. He frames K as a sadist, using a boy's life for personal entertainment. Marco offers a deeply twisted deal. If Carmen helps Fabrizio win this match, K's obsession will shatter. One devastating loss, and K drops the project. Yu will finally be free to live the ordinary life Carmen wants for him. Marco watches her eyes closely, planting the seed of betrayal deep in her loyalist heart. Carmen's face hardens. She refuses to betray the man who literally carried her out of a war zone. Marco sighs. He slides a sharp knife across the heavy ropes, binding her wrists. He cuts her loose, openly mocking her blind faith in a coach who has lost his humanity. The assistant confirms that Yu just scored a massive knockdown. Marco slices the ropes, binding her wrists. As Carmen heads for the door, Marco drops one final warning. Provoking a monster like Yu with physical violence is a fatal mistake when the skill gap is this vast. Inside the ring, Fabrizio's face is already a ruined, bloody mess. Back in the hospital, Coach K's assistant listens carefully as Carmen details the true events of that night. Marco didn't order the physical attack. He let her leave the facility entirely unharmed. It was a tragic, random coincidence. She ran into ordinary street thugs on her way home. Marco's psychological setup was brilliant, but the physical reality of the beating was completely unrelated to the Santorinos. The assistant's blood runs cold. If Marco didn't order the hit, then Coach K's entire retaliation strategy is aimed at the wrong target. Carmen admits she lied because she knew exactly what K would do if he thought a rival gym had drawn blood. The camera pans out. Coach K is standing in the doorway, his eyes wide in the shadowed hospital corridor. He heard every single word. K processes the realization. The anger in his chest was misdirected. The assistant stares at the door, the heavy silence confirming that the monster has already been unleashed for no reason. In the ring, the slaughter has reached apocalyptic levels. Fabrizio throws a desperate punch into the void. Yu buries a devastating hook directly into Fabrizio's cracked ribs. Yu's red eye tracks every pathetic movement. The champion's chemically enhanced body is tearing itself apart, trying to absorb the sheer kinetic trauma. The canvas is practically painted red. The commentators scream for the referee to intervene. Fabrizio throws a desperate, sloppy swing. Yu slips it with absolute ease, positioning himself for another surgical strike. The assistant begs Coach K to stop the match. He knows K holds the leash. But K just stares. He realizes boxing isn't a sport to Yu anymore. It's a method of execution. Another crushing blow shatters Fabrizio's guard. The referee, bought and paid for by Marco, stands perfectly still, ignoring the brutal, one-sided massacre. Marco watches from the corner, the color draining from his face as his own corrupt strategy becomes his brother's death sentence. He thought the bribed referee would allow Fabrizio to cheat. Instead, the bribed referee is allowing Yu to commit legal, uninterrupted murder. Marco planned to let Fabrizio absorb minor blows to secure a clinch. Fabrizio drops his guard intentionally. Yu drops his stance slightly, waiting for the champion to stumble forward. The clinch is the only way to nullify Yu's speed. Fabrizio relies on his longer reach to execute the trap. He isn't throwing a knockout punch. He is intentionally extending the match to deliver the maximum amount of physical agony. Yu's foot slides across the canvas. Fabrizio throws a wild haymaker, screaming in absolute terror. Yu vanishes entirely from his field of vision. The counter hits Fabrizio flush on the temple, scrambling his nervous system. The crowd is roaring for blood. They came to see a fight, but they are watching a horror movie. Yu lands another catastrophic blow, lifting the heavy champion off his feet. In the hospital, Carmen closes her eye, a single tear escaping. She knows exactly what is happening in that ring. The void has completely taken over. Coach K stands perfectly still in his corner. He watches his masterpiece dismantle human flesh with zero remorse. Marco grips the ropes, finally understanding the sheer terrifying magnitude of his miscalculation. All the mind games, all the military drugs, all the corrupt officials, they are completely meaningless in the face of absolute, God-given power. Fabrizio's head snaps back, a fresh spray of crimson painting the ropes. The champion's body hits the mat with a sickening thud, his eyes entirely blank. The referee slowly begins the count, giving the broken man maximum time to absorb the humiliation. Marco's eyes widen as his empire crumbles. Fabrizio forces his shattered frame back up, roaring in pure, primal rage, and immediately eats a punishing low blow, a taste of his own dirty medicine. Marco realizes the horrifying truth. Yu is actively using Fabrizio's own fouls against him, knowing the referee won't call them. Marco finally realizes he fundamentally misjudged Coach K. Coach K's eyes glow in the darkness of the arena. K smirks from the corner. The Santorinos thought they were the apex predators in a ring full of weak sheep. K looks at Marco with absolute disdain. They were wrong. They are just feral dogs bleeding out in the lion's den.